What's going on, guys? It's Madman Plant. We are back in the podcast studio with my favorite King Palms as we're going to roll up. I got my smoke card over here, so got to bring the smoke card on over. As you can see, I got cones on the bottom. I got tons of lighters, so if I forget a lighter, I got all my glass pieces, which this one was actually given to me at National Cannabis Festival last year by my friend Glass Flow Art. Mr. Kyle actually shot his wedding about 10 years ago, which is kind of funny, and we've been friends ever since. And he gave me this, so I do have a bottle of water, or we'll have to go get a bottle of water throughout the show to fill that up. And as always, I always start off the podcast with a 3-gram King Palm. So they got their XLs all the way up to their triple XLs, which can go up to a 10-gram blunt. These are 3 grams. I personally like them because tobacco free and it's a palm leaf. So when you talk about flavor, you actually get full flavor in your smoke. So today I'm really excited because we got Sacha, who's in the background, about to come on, and we're going to talk all about cannabis and a little bit of COVID and mental health and clarity. But before we get started, I do want to let you guys know that we have some pretty exciting things coming up here for the Grow series and the podcast in just a couple weeks. And soon I will be able to talk about a lot of that. Also, we will be starting our traveling soon. So I'm really excited about that. So there's plenty of opportunities for us to meet and greet. So as I pack this up and get ready, let's bring Sacha on. How's it going?
Hey, I'm good. How about yourself?
I'm doing fantastic. You know, I'm really excited because this entire month I've had a podcast every Wednesday. Sometimes, you know, I'm talking to myself on a Wednesday. So I'm so glad that we got people up and talking. So welcome.
Yes, thank you. Happy hump day.
Is that today?
Yep. Yeah, get over that middle hump of the week and then you coast into Friday. Tomorrow's Friday Eve, so
Kind of like over the hill for just a week.
exactly. Then it's smooth coasting.
Well, that's awesome. Are you going to be smoking on anything tonight?
I forgot to grab my stuff before I came over here, so I've just got my little vape one. So no dry herb right now.
Well, if you ever need a break during the show to grab some, let me know and we'll go make sure
Okay.
that you get plenty because I smoke. What's cool is, do you use a Canatrol?
No, I've never even heard of that actually. I've got
Really?
the Venti vape dry herb vaporizer.
Okay. Well, do you grow, right?
I do not. I
You
do
don't
not
grow? Oh my
grow.
goodness, this
I've
is
attempted
interesting.
it and I killed the seeds, and clearly I don't have a green thumb for cannabis.
No, you do have a green thumb for cannabis. That's bullshit. You got this. It takes killing the plant. If you've killed one plant, you're on your way to successfully growing. You know what I mean?
Okay.
I've killed lots of plants before, especially in the beginning stages. I would get back into that. And
Yeah.
also, you know, finding a really good genetic, or even better, start out with a clone, and then you'll already be 2 weeks into the growing phase. So you'll skip about 2.5 weeks of just it developing its first like fan leaves and true leaves.
Yeah.
And then you already have something that's a little bit more robust. But I talk to people all the time who think that they can't grow cannabis, and it's not you. It's just a
Thank
learned
you.
language. You don't know what you don't know, and that's part of the beauty of it. So I definitely think you should try again. Keep trying, keep killing plants. That's what I always encourage. So now when you do
Makes me feel
smoke,
more comfortable.
right?
I was like, how can I screw this up? It's just seeds. I'm just trying to sprout seeds, but I forgot about them, and they dried out in the sun. Typical
Well,
ADHD
you gotta
stoner
water
brain.
them.
That one vital thing. So yeah, starting a little later. I don't have to be so stressful.
Yeah, right. What's going on, Stony Grows? What's going on, Tommy D? So when you do smoke, are you an indica or are you sativa?
I go by terpenes. So a lot
Okay.
of people, yeah, they, find they are more sativa leaning or indica, but for me, yeah, it's based on those terpenes. So during the day, I lean more towards the limonene, however you want to say it.
Yep.
Terpinolene, pinene, those things really like lift me up. They don't give me that kind of foggy brain where you're sitting there reading the same thing 10 times. Um, so I go by that, and then if I'm having a little bit more of a high pain day, I'll add in a bit of the myrcene strains during the day. But for the most part, in the evenings is when I'll get into the myrcene, the linalool, a little bit of the sativa, or not sativa, sorry, the limonene, to kind of give me a little bit of the clear headedness. But for the most part, I just like to chill in the evening, but during the daytime, I need to be productive. So yeah, I've found experimenting with different terpenes is what gave me more of the effects that I want, based on, what I'm going about doing that day or evening versus just picking up a sativa or a hybrid or an indica and just kind of going on a whim.
Now, have you now we're gonna dive into it too, chronic illness and stuff like that. Is there a certain terpene that you like that's your like go to? So if like things are going wrong for the day, this is the one specifically that you're looking for.
Yeah, myrcene. That one without fail always helps curb my pain.
And then what about Mercy? Tell us a little bit about it, because honestly, you can educate me now because I know a little bit about terpenes, but you already have a head game curve. So let's dive into it. So Mercy, what is it, and what are the effects? What are we looking at?
Yeah, so for me, like you touched on, I deal with chronic illness, and coming into I was not a lifelong cannabis consumer or grew up with it around my family, any of that. So I got into it as an adult. And, of course, you're still playing with something new. It's still fun, but because my goal was a little bit different, I really wanted to dive into the whys. Why does this strain make me feel that way? And so it led me into the terpene research, and to associate things for memory, I always put it to, what it reminds me of. And so obviously indica, couch, people have those
Yeah.
relations. And so for me, myrcene, I always remembered because it gives me munchies a lot of times. So it was that M that I'm like, okay, I know that if I'm in the munchy mood, it means I'm chilling, I'm on the couch, I'm not doing a whole lot. And so I found that actually myrcene, it breaks the blood-brain barrier.
Mm.
So it actually provides a little bit more of a relief than the way other terpenes affect your system. So, I was able to kind of delve more into the science behind it, and then, you feel like a mad scientist doing different experiments, and it's like, well, I have to smoke some weed because, I've got to figure out what my routine's going to be, and, how does this strain affect me and stuff like that. So as I tried different things, and I was able to pinpoint, okay, well, these strains typically have more myrcene or limonene or, various things, and I noticed that it started to affect me this way. So that's how it got me down, learning a little bit more of the terpenes and how that's, more of the effects that you're going to be noticing versus just the strain name, because we all know now too that some strain names aren't representative of the original strains. They can be something a little bit different. So going by what's actually in that package versus brand or strain name, things like that, I want to know what's actually in the weed.
It's funny you say that because a lot of times you're like, "Oh, this is cherry something," and it's like, this doesn't even taste like cherry anything. Like, why did they come up with this name? Like,
It's so
who
misleading.
designed this? Hey, Casey's, what's going on? He's Spanish. So, with that being said, you are, that's what I love, already talking to you about is, the science is one part of it, the growing is another part of it. And you already
Yeah.
are heavy handed on the science side. Now, you said that a lot of people sometimes will have different opinions when you talk about COVID and some of the lingering factors. Now, one of them has to do with your leg sporadically
Mhm.
moving. So you had an Instagram video on that. What was that? What were we looking at?
Yeah, so that happens all the time, unfortunately. So even as I'm sitting here right now, it feels like my body is just it's got a slight vibration, kind of like I'm plugged into the electric socket. But if I stiffen my muscles, so all I have to do is, straighten my leg and then kind of tighten it a little bit and bend it, and it starts shaking like that uncontrollably. And it's only unless I relax it that it stops. So things like going up, oh, of course, popping in for a visit.
Honey, oh
um,
yeah,
my
gorgeous.
mine's in with my husband getting some
Hmm.
treats. Otherwise, he'd be here spying up her. um, Now, of course, I just forgot what I was talking about. I got so
We were
distracted by
talking
her.
about your restless leg syndrome and
Right, yes.
stiffening it out and the
Yes, my
wobble
crazy
and
legs. Yeah, so, like, going up and down the stairs, it's kind of like after you've done leg day and your legs feel a little wobbly and shaky. It's kind of like that. So when I'm walking up and down the stairs or a steep hill or things like that, it activates. So it's this weird shaking that I've had to now learn how to compensate with so that it's not as debilitating in my movements.
Now, when you had COVID, were you one of those severe cases where hospitalized, oxygen, everything, or
No, no, thankfully. I had actually had it a few times. And the first time I got it, and it was like a really bad cold. I was sick for a couple weeks and, felt like I had recovered, but noticed there was just some ongoing things that were affecting me a little bit more than they used to. I was going to online university to get my project management course, and I just noticed that I was having a harder time remembering certain things. I wasn't retaining as much as I used to. I'd been in construction before, so I should be more familiar with the processes, but I couldn't get that memory association and certain terminologies. It was not coming to me like it used to. And then fast forward, I think it was a year and a half, and I got it again, and I got that Omicron variant. And for some reason, that variant, it just did me in and started causing a whole host of problems. So, a lot of autoimmune issues, neurological problems, the tremors, vision, a whole gamut of things were affected. And so I've now with cannabis found ways to cope with that and manage. But when I first had it, that's the thing is I didn't end up in the hospital or needing breathing assistance. I was put
thank
on oxygen
goodness.
when I went to the hospital, but I didn't have to go home with supplemental oxygen or anything like that. But yet it was causing all of these problems. I'd all of a sudden have my heart rate increase significantly where it felt like I was having a panic attack and a heart attack, but nothing had brought it on. I wasn't doing anything significant. And so that was surprising. And then, it kind of trickled to these so many different things where it's like, well, is it related to that or is this now something else? But yeah, so it's been a learning curve of my body and how it's responded.
No, that's interesting. And before, like you said, you got into cannabis during your adult life. I did too.
Mm,
I smoked. I started really smoking. I tried it once at 14, and the first time I ever smoked weed, it actually didn't do anything for me. And all my friends were
same.
like, "This is a fucking amazing." I was like, "This is fucking stupid." And they're like,
Yeah.
"You don't feel it." I'm like, "No." And
No, it's
then
all in your head.
exactly. And then later I got into it because I wanted to used to be in law enforcement. And then I got arrested for speeding really fast in the middle of the night. And I was like, well, I don't want to. I had to spend a day in jail, and I was like, I don't want to do this to other people. So then I went
Yeah.
to the dark side. I was like, I want to start smoking weed now. I want to go down a rabbit
Right.
hole. And I was like around 21, 22 when I first really started smoking. And I was actually quitting cigarettes to smoke weed because I was like, wait, I could get high and smoke versus just smoke. Why
Yes.
didn't everybody do that?
It will less damaging to your lungs. It's actually beneficial as opposed to cigarettes causing a whole host of health issues. But
Right?
you're not the first person I've heard who's used cannabis to switch off of cigarettes.
I never think about cigarettes anymore. Like,
Yeah.
only thing I want to smoke is weed. Like, there are times where I'm like in a crowd and I'll smell the cigarette, from a distance, and I'm like, that
What
smell
is
is
that?
wonderful. But I still have no desire to actually smoke the cigarette. Like my
Yeah.
wife, Lacey, granted, from the beginning of this year until right now, she's been completely cigarette free, alcohol free. Not that she needs to be. That she's just doing it a personal cleanse or whatever.
Yep.
But she always is like starting up again, stopping. So this time, I really hope that she stays with her goal. If you're watching, Lacey, proud of you. But no, it's one of those things where I just never had that inkling to go back. Like I don't think about it like that. I don't even remember the days of me smoking. I mean, I do, but like very vaguely.
Yes. Yeah, it's not like when you smell it, you get that itch almost. Like
I
cannabis, you
do with
smell it and you're like,
weed.
"Ooh."
As soon as I smell weed, I'm like, all right, it's time to smoke.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
sometimes,
I have a friend here somewhere.
or sometimes I'll just imagine that I smell weed, and I'm like, does it smell like weed? And everybody's like, no, and I'm like, okay, it's just me then.
Damn
I
it.
want to smell weed.
Yeah, do you want it to smell like weed? Oh man.
So,
Yeah.
okay, so on your profile, it says
Mhm.
right here, 2024 cannabis or Cannyfluencer nominee. So, what did we get nominated for? This is super cool, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. So that was within Canada. It's
Oh,
called
very cool. You're from
CanExpo.
Canada
Yes, yeah, I'm in Canada. I'm
right
in the Great
now?
White North. Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah,
What part?
I'm on the East Coast right now. I grew up on the West Coast. We're in the
Okay.
East Coast right now helping out some family. So yeah, I am in New Brunswick, which if you're not familiar with
Not
Canada, you know where Maine is?
yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
so we're just kind of up above Maine and to the east a little bit.
Oh
So
man.
really close to the border.
Have you done any cannabis events like Lyft is in Canada, I believe?
Yeah, I have not been to Lyft. I've only been to one cannabis event, which was called Grow Up, and they do different locations, Edmonton, Vancouver, and Toronto. They'll do Grow Up, and then same thing with Can Expo. They're in Toronto, so they're kind of like our major players in the cannabis industry for events.
Yeah.
There's some other companies too, but it's mostly like Vancouver, Calgary, Toronto. I do believe Montreal has a few different things, but the major events where everybody kind of pools together is usually in the major hubs.
Now is the BC British Columbia bud still as big as it once was, or is there more diversity and options?
So it's still a powerhouse. They've got one of the best growing conditions and the resources. I mean, everybody who's been in the cannabis game, they've either grown up in BC, they are in BC right now, or they spent time in BC. They've just got optimal conditions, climate, and then like I said, you've got those specialty people who are in the industry and they're all close to the same area. So yeah, I mean, it's hard to compete, but that being said, there's still all across Canada these growers, whether they're small companies or they're bigger corporations, they're growing some amazing cannabis. And they've got the resources. A lot of growers, master growers, they'll go from one place to another, or they move up. So they start out from just being somebody who came in to trim, and then over their time work their way up. So a lot of the people they're very integrated into the industry, and so you'll find some people who were in BC have moved and brought what they know to different places. So it's not like BC is now the only place you can go to still find that quality weed, but it definitely is like the mecca. Everybody knows BC cannabis is a little bit better than other places.
Well, yeah, I
I'm
mean,
not I'm not shooting down anybody else in any other province or anything like that. It's just, yeah, BC, they kind of lead the way in certain aspects of growing.
well, yeah, I mean, the way I heard about BC Bud and I even being from Canada is from the Discovery Channel back in like the early 2000s when they were talking about it's like a huge weed fest. It's like a 1 day festival. It's like huge. People are throwing out like joints. Even before it was fully legal, I think they had the festival and cops didn't do anything about it. They just let the event go. It's very nostalgic, you
Yeah.
know. Did you ever go?
Yeah. Well, No, no, I've never been to anything like that, unfortunately. Not to say I won't go, because now that I'm in it, you hear about all of these events, and local places will do kind of their own homegrown version. They'll have like a growers cup, so to speak, where they,
Mm.
feature different brands. So which I like that they do a lot of um, you know, even though US has a lot more of those like major events that you see happening frequently, Canada's really good about having those small events where people in the community are familiar with it, and they've had people, bringing their cannabis to the event for years, and that integration. But where BC also has an advantage is they're way more proactive when it comes to alternative therapies. So, you can also possess and purchase things like cocaine and ketamine in BC, and
Interesting.
psilocybin, whereas it's still kind of making its way across the rest of Canada to kind of loosen up those restrictions. So they're always ahead of the curve on what they're doing out there. And then you see like Alberta, of course, next door to BC, we kind of get the influence. And then obviously Ontario, they keep up just as much. They've got the same capacity and more. Um, and so you'll see Ontario pick up a lot of stuff as well. But I think it'll be a little bit different on things like psilocybin being open access and whatnot. But yeah, BC, they kind of get to do some creative stuff out there.
I was a big fan of psilocybin, and as somebody that I do like microdosing, I think there's a
Mhm.
great value and proposition in doing that, responsibly. A lot of these things too, back in the day before pharmaceuticals were sacred herbs or medicine. So it's kind of one of these things where I feel like in a way society is relearning the proper usage of these. It got a little maybe too out of hand. And that's why
Yep.
you got a lot of bad stigmas. But like ketamine, in Virginia, actually, we even in Stafford, they have a ketamine center, and you can go
Nice.
there for PTSD and trauma and migraines and a whole bunch of different things. Now, I've used Special K, um, recreational, and
Yep.
it's a disassociative. It really kind of spaces you out. I remember I was one time I was at my house by myself, and I did some, and I didn't know my grandparents were coming over, and they came over, and I'm like really spaced out, and they're trying to talk to me, and I'm trying my best to try to like comprehend and be in
Be
the
normal.
conversation, but you're so withdrawn when you're doing ketamine and stuff like that. It's just very interesting. It's like it gives you the full sense of being present but not being present, you know what I
Yes.
mean?
Yep. Yeah, that kind of out of body experience.
Very buzzy, very like euphoric, very like dreamlike.
Yeah. Yeah, and I definitely advocate for having the centers, because people, well, you look at history, for thousands of years, people have always eventually done whatever they wanted to. If somebody really
And they're
wants to do
going to,
something,
yeah.
yeah. So, to have these spaces where people are like wanting to explore ketamine or psilocybin therapy, but they've got that safe environment. Because, going at home like yourself, doing a certain alternative medicine, if you don't know what to expect, or you've done your Google search and these are the typical effects, but you experience something atypical, you're going to panic, and you're not going to have the same therapeutic results as you would if somebody was guiding you through that process. So I think, having these centers popping up, showing that, hey, it's okay if you're doing something alternative to the mainstream prescriptions, and like a doctor would monitor what you're doing, with your full medication list, and make sure you don't take this with that. You're getting that exact same thing, but on a holistic level.
Yeah, well, and here's another thing too. Um, Environment and the people that you're around also will play a big role into your trip goes. And as somebody that's done a lot of psychedelics, because that's my drug of choice. Like I've never been into opiates, never was into pills, never was into like speed.
Yeah.
I'm ADHD, so I move a million miles a minute. So the first time I ever did cocaine and with my friends, and everybody was like, "This is amazing." I'm like, "You guys are fucking stupid." Now you know what it
Yeah,
feels like to be ADHD. You know what
right?
I mean? Like, I
Yeah, it's
smoke
like I feel
weed to
normal.
slow me down. Okay, I don't want to be sped up anymore. I already feel sped up. I want to slow. I'm on the
Yeah,
downers, the relaxers, the indie yourself thing. But you know, I think a lot of it too is you have to know yourself. And one thing that I would do is I would trip at events at like raves, festivals, but then I would also trip by myself. There was a lot of times where I would take acid and I would go for a bike ride around the park, or I would go to the swimming pool. You know, there's a lot of situations when you get comfortable, you can actually do things, you know, on it.
yes,
And it gives you a deeper sense of thought. And for me, as somebody that really focuses on mental health, clarity, psychology, you know, the real manifestation of self, the
yep.
development.
The mind
Uh
body connection.
exactly. I feel like that is the most appropriate time to use them. And when you're really looking into yourself, like I always have this like thing where I'm always like, Lacey's like, that's not good. I'm always like, I want to stare into like the abyss and then have the abyss stare back into me.
Yeah,
And sometimes I feel like through myself, that's how I'm going to do that, by literally staring through my own soul back into myself and being like okay and comfortable and knowing
yes,
what you're capable of. And sometimes I'm not going to lie, being out of your body, you know, as far as your comfort zone, your own euphoric value or self, is can be a very introspective thing because it teaches you how to operate on a lot of different facets, you know, good or
yes.
bad. What about you? Have
Yeah,
you are you a big psychedelic person other than cannabis? What are you into?
yeah, yeah. So I haven't tried, like I've tried cocaine. And like you, same thing everybody else is like, feel like I'm Superman. And for me, I'm like, I feel like I've just taken my ADHD meds. Like, so like I felt a little more sped up with my thoughts and, having the hard time matching my words coming out of my mouth at the rate that they're coming out of my head. It was still like a little more amped than normal.
Yep.
But yeah, the energetic, floaty feeling, I didn't really find that. And it irritated my nose too much. So
It makes
I,
it bleed.
yeah, and so I've already got enough issues to deal with. I don't need to add on anymore. But having a lot of chronic health issues, I was prescribed opiates, and a lot of people who have been on them for pain management or anything like that. They've got just as much side effects as they do benefits. And so, that they're not my priority for managing my chronic illness or anything like that, because they either cause conflict with other things that I need to do, or you're dealing with the side effects like constipation. You get a certain age, and unfortunately, guess what? It's normal, but as you go through life, I don't need to add on to the aging aspects of life or any of that stuff when I can do alternatives. So I haven't tried ketamine yet or acid, but psilocybin has been profound. Same thing with cannabis. Like, so microdosing for me, depending on how much, so up to half a gram, I can microdose with that, and the pain is virtually non-existent. So obviously on bad days, you need a little bit more to get to that threshold, but on an average day, I can take half a gram and be fine. But now to be productive on half a gram, it all depends on the person, right? So that's where learning more on how your body integrates these various medications and medicines, natural or otherwise, you get to really find like, okay, my body likes this, and it's responding in this way. And so if I have this much, I can still function and be relatively pain free, or have more flexibility in my movements. I don't feel so like my legs some days it feels like you're walking with concrete boots. And so I know that by combining different things like psilocybin and cannabis together, this is what I can do. But trying to be a normal functioning person in society, I can't go to my previous job on half a gram of psilocybin and smoke joints at my desk. That's not practical in the world we live in. And so you see a lot of people where they have to do opiates because that's the only thing that's acceptable in their workplace or, their environment. So, which is unfortunate because the benefits, once you've actually tried either a microdose or a high dose, and you feel that connectedness and the oneness with the world and being able to, like, for me, it's like a safety blanket almost. I can look inwards and review past traumas and mistakes, but I feel like I've got a blanket on. Like, it's okay to venture into those deep thoughts, and my mind is saying, like, it's okay, let's just casually walk down this path and explore these thoughts and where they came from. And yeah, I'm not too happy with, what had happened there or why I'm feeling that way, but it's okay. It's just it's a whole other dimension, and until you've tried it and had those experiences, you're always going to see it as a drug, and have those preconceived notions on what a trip is actually like versus when you go through it yourself.
No, I love that. So let's dive into that a little bit more with your experiences. So talk about that inward reflection and how you've been able to pick apart your traumas and stuff. And what type of traumas have you been dealing with?
Yeah, so growing up, I grew up in a very religious household. And so growing in that way where basically everything is controlled, and not to say that it was a cult or anything and I could never leave the house. It wasn't like that, but every aspect of your life is controlled, where it's like you always have to be a good person. You're always setting an example. People are always watching you. Don't do this. Like, it's always very on the judgment and fear side.
The
You can't
spotlight
just,
side.
yeah, yeah, you can't relax because it's like, no, people are always watching you and you need to live up to a certain example. And so that was always hard for me. And then obviously getting older and you find out that you have ADHD and different things like that, anxiety, genetic differences that cause you to react a little different than, your parents did or what they grew up with. You're treated in a way where it's like, no, that's not normal. That's not how, respectable young ladies should act. And so you're always trying to conform to a certain way. And, I got older and found it was just doing a number on my mental health. And, always trying to live for someone else's life and expectations of what they think I should be and do with my life and my role. So that was very difficult, breaking free from that form of growing up and then basically reintroducing to society of, like, what do people do for fun, because my idea of fun growing up was completely different than somebody else's.
Yeah, of
I wasn't
course.
exposed to the same movies or music and, any of that stuff because it was bad and drugs were bad, mad school lessons and all that stuff. It just, you're in that mindset. And so that in itself was a lot of trauma, realizing, I've got to rediscover who I am and start living for what I would like and what does that look like. And, so going through that. And then obviously, as you go through life, you get various experiences. You quit a job or you get fired, you've got stuff like that. But then I kind of just carried through life, learning who I was and discovering that. And then my dad got cancer, and
Mhm.
that took it into a totally different direction again, of where you get this trajectory of your life and everything is going fine, and you see, this is where I'm going to be in 5, 10, 20 years. And then all of a sudden it's like you get T-boned, and all of that stuff that you thought would be, it's going in a different direction. And
Yeah.
so situations like that, learning how to process, then getting sick. Right after I got my project management, I finally reached where I wanted to be in my career and start doing some bigger things. And then I got sick. And now, and again, my life looks entirely different. And so those have been key things where I would never have had the confidence or even the capacity, the time span, ADHD, you're always trying to distract. You're over
Yep.
here,
Oh
over
yeah.
there, moving forward, you're hamster on the wheel. And so it
Always.
right, yeah. So this literally it forced me to stop and look inwards and see, healing, obviously it encompasses so many aspects of that whole mind and body, and how your body stores trauma and how it responds in different ways when you nurture it versus berate it. And, so taking cannabis and psilocybin and kind of easing into those waters and actually learning what it's doing to my body, what it's doing to my mind, and then actually seeing and feeling the effects of that makes you want to do it more, because you actually feel like at the end of your trip, whether it's a microdose or a larger dose, you feel like you've stepped into the waters a little more and a little more, and you're able to peel away these layers that you were either too scared to or you were blind to. You didn't even know that this stuff was subconsciously bothering you. And so for me, it's been very enlightening, and it makes you want to, like I said, have more of those experiences where you're willing to peel back the curtain and go a little deeper and really find, why is it I feel that way, or why do I like those things? And seeing, is it from something that was programmed into my childhood and I was told to behave that way, or is it something that is actually in my core and what I believe? So yeah, it's been uh, just a very eye-opening learning experience, and getting rid of those notions of what you were taught it would be, and then
Mhm.
experiencing
Yep.
it, and yeah, just really diving in, and it's funny how they say that cannabis is a gateway drug. And I mean, I guess in a way you could say it is, because it opens your mind to what those natural experiences are actually like, and you feel you're comfortable with them. It feels natural. It's like the body is like, hey, we were meant to go through these things with these substances.
Well, yeah, and to touch on it, I do think it's a gateway drug. It's a gateway drug to dealing with your emotions, dealing with your pain, dealing with your anxiety. It's a gateway drug to, or a gateway to other plants. Because once you start loving to grow marijuana, I know so many people, including myself, who also now love house plants that didn't pay attention to house plants in the beginning. So yeah,
Yep.
I mean, in the right context, yes, I truly believe that cannabis is a gateway to a lot of things. And if we look at it in a broader context, when we look at natural resources and the way the world's going, it could help fight climate change. It could help fight the natural resources that are scarce when it comes to building materials and textiles and oils and fabrics and
Yes.
clothing and all the other things that cannabis can make. And it's just funny that this man-made war on drugs, which it is a man-made war on drugs, is put a stop in to so much of what could be. There's no denying. Like even I have I've been showing this off lately. I have Mr. Glenn Youngkin here
Yep.
from Virginia, who I have much respect for. Nothing against you, Mr. Glenn, but I do not like your policies when it comes to cannabis. I understand that you do not value in the same sense that we do, but as a subjection or a suggestion, subjectively, it could be said that, hold on, where is my notes here? Yeah. These are all my scripts for videos I need to still shoot.
Yep.
I'm not even kidding. Let's see, look, all of them, all my
So
script,
much.
everything that I do is scripted out. Well, not all
Yep.
of it, but most of it.
Yeah,
See,
you need kind of a draft.
it says, hold on for 1 second. Nope. Not there we go. I say so I'm gonna have a scene where I'm holding a sign that says, "Where's our $300 million?" And then my narration is going to read, legal cannabis could bring Virginia over $300 million in tax revenue each year. And that's money for free from smokers, because think about this, right? We're dealing in a world where people can't afford a lot of things. But guess what people can't afford when they can't afford rent or their bills? They can always afford weed.
Yep.
And this is where you meet people halfway. And this is how we can invest more money into our schools, our healthcare system, community programs, roads, departments like police departments, fire departments, and a lot of
Yes.
great things. And it involves something that is as simple as what people are most likely going to do in the privacy of their own home, which is smoke some weed. And
Yep.
that's why, that's why I'm saying let's put Virginia's money to work, Mr. Youngkin, and let's legalize cannabis. You know what I
Yes.
mean? For that very fact alone. And that's what I'm saying is you have such a hard on for these drugs, and we're so worried about our youth and their generation and what that's going to look like. We have more people on opiates and fentanyl and other drugs like crocodile, which is I don't know if you know what crocodile is.
Never even heard of it. No.
Okay, so crocodile originated in Florida, where he got the name
Go
crocodile
figure.
from, and it's a cheaper form of meth. So it's extremely cheap. It's the same high. It lasts a little bit longer, but the problem is it can eat away at your bones. So it will actually eat your skin, leaving the bone exposed, right? You have
Yikes.
Flocka is another drug, which is very much like crocodile, which is the same realm as meth or fentanyl, right?
Yep.
A lot of people on the podcast that I've talked to have been addicts. A lot of addicts have been on this show. In
Yep.
the last almost 2 years, we've done close to probably like 600 podcasts now. And a
Wow.
lot of people want, and from speaking from addicts, I've never been an addict, so I can only speak on what I reported. I don't know what the lifestyle is like, but from those who's speaking, cannabis is one of the best forms because one, it helps with the sickness from dope sickness when you go through withdrawals.
Yep.
Number two, like I was speaking to one girl at the National Cannabis Festival. She said her worst day as a meth addict in 10 minutes conversation was where she would shut all the blinds. She would get on her hands and knees with a magnifying glass and she would go through her carpet looking for anything she could find. And she said that she went to cannabis because she still wanted to feel, but she wanted to be clean. And I
Yep.
think that is the best thing about cannabis is it still leaves a little bit of you, a lot of you,
Yep.
where other drugs, even what we were talking about earlier, our ADHD medications can wipe you. The main reason why I don't take Concerta, Ritalin, or Vyvanse anymore is mainly because when I took them, it made me like a zombie. So yeah, I was calm, but I really wasn't much of a person anymore.
Yep.
I was sedated, and that's good for society, but I have to deal with me, not society. You know what I
Yes.
mean? So I took myself off of it, and I just figured all it is about self control, discipline, better understanding yourself, and through psychedelics and through cannabis, I can definitely say I have grown as an individual and especially as a person
Yep.
through that internal representation that you talked about just a little bit ago and my own. And that is the value of this. Used responsibly, used in a great way, this could change your life. It can give you a life. It can give you
Yes.
perspective, which not many things can.
Yep. Yeah, and help you. A lot of addicts, unfortunately, they've turned to drugs because they start not wanting to feel and remember the trauma, and they know if they could confront it, that they could start the healing process. But it is hard. You're basically raw dogging it on you gotta appreciate that smell every time, right?
It's my own
Um,
pressed. So this is all from my own pressed bud, which is the beauty
oh,
clapper that I just harvested. And it is
wonderful.
very, very nice.
Right on. You'll have to give a little bit more of a shout out about that in a minute here. I got to
I'll
hear
do
more
it
about
at the end. I don't want to take the spotlight away from my guest.
Oh, well, I appreciate that, but I feel like you're
Oh,
just
believe
as
me,
much
I
of
could
a
talk
guest
about
as
me,
to
so I'd rather talk about you.
yeah, I suppose you gotta do this all the time, right? But yeah, no, helping people to be able to confront those past issues of what led them to start using in the first place, it gives them like that safety net where they still feel like they can step back a bit and feel calm and protected. You
Yep.
still, if you like those indica strains you were talking about, they put you in the couch and you can still check out. But when you do want to approach yourself and your thoughts, yeah, it's like having that safety blanket where you can start to untether yourself from the I have to do this and I'm compulsed to do it and I need that fix to I want this fix for my life, and to see people, I've heard so many programs that are starting up, whether they're helping inmates that are currently imprisoned or
Yes.
helping ones who got out of jail and transition. And a lot of people, they go into prison or jail where they didn't have addiction, but then they're going into this experience and you're around other people. It's easy to get drugs in and out, unfortunately, still dealing with that. And they're coming out of the system in worse shape than they went in, with no support systems. And same with addicts, they're going to these treatment centers, but they're not really giving them the tools that they need to carry on with. It's just, we're going to cut you off while you're here and we're going to force you into exposing, those past traumas, and you've got this, but we're not going to give you any coping mechanisms to help you wade through that. It's just, here it is, tough love. And so, helping people where yeah, okay, maybe you're swapping one addiction for another for now, but the more you get into it, the more you learn and the more you experience and feel yourself adapting to these medications, you don't feel so scared to continue down that path. And where it's like, nope, I'm just going to relapse and continue down that because it's easier. You actually like the situation that you're in now and wanting to explore more. And that's the biggest thing, is telling people that these resources are available, and cannabis is everywhere. Even if you're in a place that's not legalized yet, guaranteed you can call someone up and they've got a friend who has a friend. So it's just teaching people that all of this is out there and you don't have to be scared to learn about yourself, or admit, hey, I'm struggling with addiction. And you're going to find so many people in the cannabis community who are going to reach out and say, I've been there, I've gone through the same thing. This is what's worked for me. You open yourself up to this huge support system of other people who have or are currently going through the same stuff. And that was one of the other things that I loved about going to cannabis, is you're losing part of your life, in one sense, like getting sick and losing my work community and friends and that lifestyle, but I traded it for another, so I'm able to find a new community where I still feel fulfilled, or like I'm part of a team, all of those things, but in a different format. So it's just changing the narrative for people that, if you've got to swap one addiction for another right now to get through, do it, because you're trying to make yourself better, and you're not going to know unless you try. And if cannabis helps you kind of bridge that gap, or even if it's just cigarettes, and you need that bridge to get over, why not, right? Why not give it a try and see, or just talk to people. That's the other thing. You can go into any dispensary and talk to people and just ask them for their personal experiences or recommendations, and just arm yourself with knowledge and see where it takes you.
Well, and to add to that too, a lot of it is, unless you're an addict and you're in it, it's kind of hard to judge and say what a person should need or what a person should be able to do with themselves, based on their situation. And I think that's one of the things too, is you can't look at the addiction through talking to people, even though they all do one type of drug, or if it's the same type of drug. You can't look at addiction just like community as a whole. You have to look at it individually. And I think
Yeah.
that's the hard thing to do. And when you, like you were talking about prison programs, we were actually just talking about this on my other podcast last week, actually. And I think not, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I say this all the time, but I do have my thoughts. And there's over 1 million people incarcerated in the United States. The United States has more incarcerated people than any other country in the world, but we are the land of the free. And most prisons are privately owned. And, it could be suggestively or suggestively said that possibly the institutionalism is a booming business. And there's a reason why it only goes so far. But I also see it like this too. These programs, no matter how good their intention are, it's kind of like I equivalent like this to like a home grower, right? If I'm a home grower, which I am, and I have, let's say, like in my upstairs garden, I have 8 plants, right? If I have 8 plants, I can attend to those plants very well. And their internal development and their structure and everything can be accounted for on a very more observant and interactive basis. But when I'm dealing, like, let's say if I was a grow facility, like, like at a legal facility where there's
Yep.
3,000 plants, it all has to be systematic. It all has to be the same. So this level of aftercare or this next level, I feel like in a way is going to not exist because it's not necessarily designed for the individual. It's designed for the
The whole.
circumstances or the institution. You know what I mean? And I think that's the problem with rehabilitation is one, you're dealing with the individual. Like, I have a lot of friends who have been incarcerated for a long time. One of my friends is my mentor, and he's a multimillionaire, drives a Lambo, goes out of the country all the time to these things. He went on a cruise, and I was like, I bet you went on one of those cruises where you pay like $12,000 a person. He's like, try 30,000 a person.
Yeah.
And when you spend that much money, he's like, you get your own private elevator, you get private access to different areas, so you don't have to walk where other people go. They come to your room on a first name or last name basis. Everything, he said, it's totally different. But he's
Yeah.
also a guy that spent 9 years in federal prison. You know what I mean? Was seriously broke before 2020. And then
Yeah.
through, legitimized business and, his skill and resource blew the fuck up. And I
Yeah.
think that's the thing, though, is you do have people who are going to maximize, but you also have people who, to them, they're just going to come back. And I think, in a way, and I don't know too much about the prison system. So, I'm speaking based on documentaries and things that I've seen and, the reels from inmates that, sneak out videos and everything.
Yeah.
But I definitely think that, and then obviously it's probably common fact, that the prison system is a booming business. And sometimes it takes more time, maybe suggestively, to really focus on an individual than it is to have them wind up back in the system again. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm not trying to be a conspiracy theorist. I'm really not. But
But it's
until
simpler.
but
It's very
until the
true.
dollar becomes worth more than a human life, which it's not, I always wonder if those type of statements might be factual or
Yeah.
carry weight. Because I don't want to be like one of these like Alex Jones guys who I'm not trying to speak like share false knowledge, but
Yes.
as a person who just is open minded,
Observing.
I'm seeing a cycle here, and when I look at patterns and cycles, is usually how I identify things. I just see a revolving door where maybe it's not 100% designed for success as it is for numbers. Because think about it, even though it costs, I think it's $8 an inmate per day, is what the documentary was saying. Is it $8? But then the inmate also has to pay. So it costs money for the inmate to be there. And then the inmate has to also pay to be there, you know? And then
Yeah.
they have to earn a wage, which is just on cents of the dollar.
Yeah,
So
it's never going to make up to what they owe when they get out.
my thing is, I really believe in like second chances. As a person that has had a very rocky lifestyle in the beginning, did not always make the best chances. Even still today, I'm not a perfect person. You know, I have a lot of imperfections. There's a lot of things that I still need to work on. You
Well,
know,
we're
I'm
human.
just like everybody else. But at the same time, you know, if you give person opportunity, tools, resources, they can apply themselves. But if you don't, how do you expect somebody to ever know and want more? Like if you didn't know that you deserved more in life, you would settle for anything because anything that you got, it would mean the world to you. You never knew there
Yep.
was more out there. And I think it's one of these things where it's not a sign of a lack of intelligence. It's the common thought of you don't know what you don't know. And if you've never lived a lifestyle, if you've never experienced a culture, if you've never learned a language, then that barrier of lost education is going to play into experience. And I think
Yep.
that's what we deal with more as humans is not the fact that we're dumb, is the fact that we just don't know what we don't know. And there's
Yep.
not always guides and placements to do that. Plus, you know, I imagine in prison, you're not just worried about getting out, you're worried about survival and the whole prison code that exists and way more things I have no idea what I'm talking about. And that's okay. But you know, it brings up, you know, idea and awareness that I think mental health, the forefront of knowing yourself, knowing your body, getting educated, learning more, pursuing is the ultimate way that you're going to be able to really set yourself free, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And whether that's you're on the 17th or the 70th floor as a big CEO, or you're just somebody like you and I having a great conversation, that mindset ultimately shifts that outcome. Sorry, I go down on a
Exactly.
rabbit hole
Oh,
and I
no,
don't want to go too
I love
conspiracy
it.
theorist. So it was like, what the fuck is he talking about?
Whoa, what
I
is
got a
this?
bunker right underneath this goddamn table. All right. My wife canned enough for 3 years.
Yes. You know, it, it's it's these conversations though that I feel needs to happen more often. We're so programmed now to only speak on certain things that are politically correct, or I don't know, so I'm not going to speak. Well, if you don't know, ask. We're not going to learn and be able to change the problem areas if we don't even know what they are. And same like you said, if people don't even know what they can aspire to, they're not going to continue reaching. And so by just normalizing these conversations, this is how I think and feel. It may be different from you, but that's great because now we can share our viewpoints, and you can teach me something I didn't know. I can teach you something that you didn't know, and then we can find someone else that they can teach us something, and it spreads. You're just normalizing that every day. Like, I'm addicted to whatever, or I struggle with depression or suicidal thoughts. It's okay. Guaranteed, if you talk to 5 other people, at least one of them is gonna have the same shared experience or feelings or thoughts as you. And just taking that step and saying, "Hey, let's have this conversation." And it's okay. And if people disagree with you, that's okay too, because they're going through something else. But guaranteed there's gonna be someone who's like, "Oh, I can relate to that. Okay. So this is, I can talk about it now," or broaching the subject. I was watching this podcast and they were talking about this. What are your thoughts on it? It's starting those conversations and getting that snowball effect where more and more people are comfortable to broach those subjects and say, "Hey, I agree with you. That's not right. What can we do to change it?" Or, "I agree. This is working so well. How can we share it with more people?" And it builds, but we've got to make things okay first. We can't be saying, "Oh, you came from prison," or, "Oh, you came from prison and now you're addicted to meth. Oh, we have nothing in common." guaranteed if you were put in a similar situation, the result would end up the same. So it's just understanding everybody's got that unique experience, but we can share those experiences and normalize it together and have that support system. So it doesn't matter who you are or where you are, especially now in this day and age with technology. We feel more isolated than we ever have. But it shouldn't be that way. We've got the technology, we've got the resources. People have the money that, well, let's start putting our money where our mouths are. Let's do it. We have the ability, the connections. People don't need to be struggling. They shouldn't have to be sent to prison and then come out and their entire life is destroyed. And now, yeah, second chance. Oh, you've got this, but I'm not going to be the one to help you or guide you or like, no, I've got to stay. Who cares? Like it's not that big of a deal. There's so many other things happening in the world that are scary and, violent, the weather, all of that stuff. It's all happening to everyone. So when it comes down to it, we're all the same. We're just experiencing things a little bit different. So open up to that person that you didn't think you had anything in common and see the world is all the same. Let's just talk about it. Let's share.
Well, I think the biggest thing is opening up the doors. You're 100% right. Morgan once I've said this like so many times, but it's really true. Morgan Freeman was asked, "How do you end racism?" And then he said, "You stop talking about it." And I feel like, how do you end the stigma against cannabis? You start having the conversation about it. You know what I mean? Just like you were
Yep.
saying. And I think the biggest way to really see, my mindset on cannabis freedom is you can't be like during like the rights movement, we had Martin Luther King and then we had Malcolm X. So they were similar in some ways. Malcolm X was a little bit more tied to more of the violent style and more of the guerrilla, warfare and in your face. And Martin Luther King was a little bit more reserved about trying to leverage, conversation and mass
Yeah.
speaking.
Respect.
Yeah. And I think when we go into this, especially to like people like a governor like Mr. Youngkin, you can't go in this, one, disrespectfully, and two, we can't go into this saying like, well, we know everything, because there's things that we can learn from their side, there's things that we can learn from our side. But I think the biggest thing is it's not so much trying to convince one person. It's like you were kind of saying earlier. Let's say you have a friend and their friend is totally against cannabis. Well, that friend gets sick, and all of a sudden, let's say they get cancer and they have trouble eating. And because they're such in a bad place, they do something that they normally wouldn't do, because now that they're sick and they need to eat and they've heard lots of things about it, and they
Yep.
finally give in. That's how you get more people, in my opinion, immersed into cannabis. It's not going to be what we say, and it's not going to be like the protest and we should do this.
Yeah.
It's going to get somebody at a vulnerable point and then somehow offer them cannabis, or have them see a loved one respond very well to cannabis in some way, and then all of a
Yep.
sudden it clicks in their mind. And I think that's the true way, is the education, the science, the medical benefits. I think that's the biggest strongest argument that we have, and it's something that needs to be focused on. And through the podcast, through the stories, through all the conversations of what we're doing as individuals, what we're doing as a community, what we're doing as growers and smokers, or people that just support cannabis, is we're opening that up, because it just takes just one opportunity to just slide it in, and somebody to see it work. And I think that's the biggest thing. And a lot of people have this mindset where it's like us against them, and it's not that way. It's just,
Mhm.
how can they understand it? Like it's like us trying to go to like a Chinese restaurant and trying to have small talk with the raider, but we don't speak Chinese and they don't speak English. None of it's going to make sense. People are eventually going to get frustrated and nothing's going to happen. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? We'll probably just
Yeah,
leave.
you're going to be unhappy.
You know what I mean? But now, if we all saw something and we all pointed at something, and then it clicked, and then they liked that too. Now here's a smile. Now here's an interaction. Now there's a laugh. Now there's the opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah, it's relating on those, like you said, on the same level. We sometimes over talk certain things when it comes down to just basic. And
Mm,
like you said, finding it's my favorite when I hear somebody say, "I didn't know you used cannabis," or "I didn't know you did that." And it's like, thank you. I want you to be surprised because the people that you would normally associate being a stoner or pothead, they're everyday people. They're some of the highest executives in companies, like, so you can't just judge a book by its cover. Let's just, again, peel it back and get on that same page and that shared thing, like you said, finding a picture or something like that where it's like, okay, I understand. I relate. It's on that language I speak, but it's not well, I grew up religious, and I know that hounding people with information
yeah.
doesn't work. It makes them resistant, but if you just go about your day, live your life, and people say, "Hey, I knew that you were, struggling with pain before and you couldn't do this, but now I see you're doing it again. What happened? What are you doing differently?" "Oh, actually, I use a cannabis cream. It helps with my arthritis," or whatever. And simple as that. It's those normal everyday things where you have people being like, "I didn't know it could do that. I didn't know there was creams or oiled. I always thought, I had to smoke it and smell like, a walking cannabis plant just to find relief." And, so it's just those everyday things, just going about our lives and, like you said, normalizing it without doing it in such a forceful or controlling or like I'm better and I know more than you way. It's just, hey, this is what I do. If you want to ask me about it, go right ahead. If you're not okay with it, that's all right too. I'm not going to beat you over the head because you're oh, you only do psilocybin and not cannabis. Like that's not what the plant is about, And so it's getting people to realize, just having those conversations or asking questions or going on a dispensary website to browse products in the privacy of your own home. Like it's all good, it doesn't matter how you go about it. We're all doing the same thing, just in different ways. And yeah, opening it up, just showing people, even Instagram, and like you said, this podcast, there's so many different topics that we're
Mm,
conversing about, and there's going to be someone where they're like, "Oh, I didn't know that," or and it's just changing that thought, and maybe it'll be 5 years down the road before they actually try cannabis, but it's just changing their viewpoint, their mindset on what a stoner looks like or being high looks like or any of that stuff, and just giving the actual real example, not just the information that the governments or municipalities are sending out or mad, don't just look at these articles, look at the people, talk to people. That's where you're going to learn more.
no, 100%. Um, right now we're at the hour mark. I'm gonna take a quick five. Actually, I don't need 5 minutes, but just a 2 minute break. So if you need anything or want to get some weed or anything, it'll be live stream. Just open everybody if anybody wants to get refreshments. But I'll be back in just 2 seconds, and then we'll continue on.
Okay, sounds good.
Awesome. All right, we are back.
And we're back.
Yeah, I started doing a 5 minute break in the middle because after I would get up after like 2 hours or 2.5 hours, my legs would kill me. So
Yeah,
as I'm getting
need a
older, I need to
bathroom
start
break.
stretching more, right? And go to the bathroom.
Yep.
Sometimes I'm just
Yeah.
like, oh my God.
Yeah, but wow, like I'm surprised that it went by that quickly. It feels like we've only been chatting for 20 minutes.
That's actually I'm glad that you say that because that's like my little spell I have on people. Most times when we talk for about 2 hours or 2.5 hours or even 3 hours, most people were like, damn, that really felt like we were just talking for like 45 minutes. I had no
Yeah.
idea that much time had gone by because we're already at an hour and 12 minutes. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, when you had first asked me to come on here, that was one of the first things I was like, "Oh my God, 2 hours." Like I've only ever done one conversation like this before. I don't know if I
what was
can
that?
converse for that long on cannabis.
What was that? What was that conversation like? Which podcast were you on?
Of course, now that you ask me, my brain just went, "Bleh." Let me
Oh man, it's okay.
gonna go on my Instagram because I'm sure it's on there. Um, let's see
Bam, 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 bam.
where.
Is
Oh,
it the
now I can't find
Canna
it.
Band Connect? No.
No, I thought it was on here. KGL TV is what it's called.
Oh, okay,
That's who
perfect.
yeah. And you're familiar with them?
No, but they
Oh,
sound
okay.
awesome.
Yeah, so
I
they do
support
a few.
everybody.
Yeah. Well, I figured maybe you did because they've interviewed some people from the US as well, and so
Oh,
they kind
very
of do
cool.
cross-border collaboration. Yeah. Yeah, so that was the first one. There some other Canadian ladies
Very
chit-chatting.
nice.
Yeah, so it's nerve-wracking because it's like, I don't feel like I've got that much personal story to share, especially because my cannabis journey is relatively short. It hasn't been very long that I've been consuming. But yeah, since we've been just chatting, there's so many different topics where you don't feel like you're reading from a script. It's like, oh, okay, here's prompt response number one, and here's response number two. It's the open dialogue, which is it's nice because it gets you out of the head of being stressed. What do I say? Is it going to sound right? Or is it going to make sense to people? There's so many thoughts going through your head, and then you get going and like, oh, we're already halfway through the time. Like, it's nice.
Well, thank
It
you. I
allays my
appreciate that.
fears.
Well, my thing is, I think conversating and conversation is an art. You know what I mean? And it's a skill. And one of those things is, you you don't want like when I teach people like because a lot of people ask me about podcasting is you don't want the conversation to stop. So when the conversation stops, so when we're in conversation, you'll get to this euphoric state where you're just kind of like zoomed in and kind of really into the conversation. And what happens is if you let the conversation go dry, it can cut that feeling. And once that feeling is cut, it creates the awkwardness. And one thing I can't
Makes
stand in
sense.
podcasts is where it's question, answer, question, answer, question, answer. It's not ping pong. It's tennis or like it's a constant volley. So like almost like it should almost like composing music. So it's going it's back
There's
and
a
forth.
rhythm.
So yeah, so I'm talking, you're talking, I'm talking, you're talking, I'm talking, you're talking. But you also got to be in the conversation, one, actively listening, but also getting ready, kind of like a DJ, like sampling what you're going to say next while you're listening to what's going on, and then using a keyword or phrase or something that you just said to bring in my discussion. A lot of things, and you can use this as a little free game, is when I feel like I'm going to run out of something to say or I don't know what I'm going to do anymore, I'll start talking about things that I know a lot about because then it's going into what I know. So I don't have to beat around the bush of trying to figure it out. the
Yeah.
guest will usually catch on to something. So, like, if we were in a conversation like right now and I was about to end this topic and go to another one, I'd be like, okay, so let's talk about home growing. I know a lot about home growing. You haven't done home growing. So it's something that where you can control the narrative and then you put it back in, but you're the composer
Yeah.
of this conversation. So the idea is you want to have the forward thought that you want to keep the energy and the conversation going, and that's by just mainly, in my opinion, just being yourself. Don't try to overdo it. Now, there are
Yeah. You
times
cram
where
a set list in of topics that you have to discuss, and it doesn't feel natural to flow through the conversation.
Now, there are times like when we did Cherry Stoner and I have like rape victims on or heavy PTSD or trauma. I'm about to have a guy on the podcast. His name is Tristan, really awesome guy. He put a shotgun in his mouth and he pulled the trigger and he survived. But
Wow.
obviously, there are a lot of ramifications that he's dealing with, but he's in very positive spirits. He's doing his thing. But even with, like, for instance, him, I'll do a one-to-one conversation before it, because there are times when I, like, for instance, if you were like, oh yeah, like, I'm a trauma person and I want to talk about this, where I'll do a full audit. So I'll go in to figure out how much I can press, how much somebody wants to talk about anything. Because, like, if you look at Cherry Stoner's interview, we talked about her three different rapes, because she was raped three different times in three different situations. And we spent about almost 2 hours the night before the conversation. And even during the podcast, she said, I don't know where we're going to start. I need your help, madman. And we had a full on conversation in detail, every, graphic, almost kind of like we were reliving it with her, and
Yeah.
through it. And that's kind of the value too, is, we can go as deep or as shallow, we can make it as fun or as, you know
Educational.
and yeah, education is possible. The biggest thing is just being able to provide the safe space, and anybody can do it. I'm not, you
Yes.
know what I mean? It's nothing special. It's just one of those things where it's just being genuine, and then also yourself, learning a lot about different people and different things. And I specialize a lot in learning about, like, mental health and addiction, stuff like this. Plus, I've spent a lot of time way before this podcast helping my friends go to NA meetings, AA meetings, sitting with them. Some of my friends were very big addicts. So,
Yeah.
I have a long history well before ever talking about it. And that's also too, getting immersed, and getting involved somehow. And that's why I just think it's so important, because regardless of what you do, whether it's a podcast or you just having conversations with people on a daily basis, or just, uplifting people through your presence, whatever it is that you're doing in the world, it can have a prolonged effect. It can keep people on this planet another day. And that's a lot. So, because there's
Yes.
a lot of people who leave prematurely, and that's always sad to see. And
Yeah.
as a suicide survivor, I would have been one of those people at a very young age. So,
Yes. And that's so important. Like you said, literally just providing the space. I cannot get over how many people, and I was one of them, where it doesn't matter where you're at in your life, you can find yourself feeling very alone and without that safe space. And to be able to provide it to people where even if they're not the ones being on the show, they can watch someone else and see that experience and the bravery or the mannerisms, just however they're going about it. It kind of gives you that example. Okay, well, if they can do it, maybe I can do it too. Or, oh, I never thought about it that way. That totally relates to me. Like, I've never heard someone talk about this thing in that format before. I don't feel so alone. And we've said before, that's one of the biggest things nowadays is people feel very alone when we've got every tool in the world to not be alone. And
Mhm.
so just having these situations where, even myself, where I came in beforehand, feeling very nervous, and I don't know what to talk about. I don't know how to say things. I don't feel like I should be looked to as much of a example for mental health or cannabis education as another person. But in reality, that doesn't matter. I've stripped away that notion of being so worried about how I'm going to come across. And it just flows in naturally. And, even myself going through that and talking to you about it and having someone else watch it and be like, oh, they were scared to do this too. They didn't know what they would do. And by the end of it, they made it through and it was fine. And well, now I'm going to give it a try. It's just doing all of those things. There's always going to be someone who does it first, and like you said, you're not the only podcast in the world, but there's going to be someone who catches on to yours. I mean, the first thing that caught my eye about you was your puppy, so
Not
it's
the
just
pink hair.
always,
Oh man,
I know, which is
he tried
surprising
so
because
hard.
hot pink, that's like my favorite, even though I wear a lot of black. But yeah, there's always going to be something that catches someone's eye and makes them stop and watch or listen. And that's the biggest thing. If this can be that safe space for someone, or now that I've felt this safe space with you, I carry on to the next person and say, oh, have you checked out this podcast, the conversations that they have, and it just continues to spread and go down that train of positivity and the snowball effect, where it's all started with that one conversation and just jumping in, not feeling as scared as I was initially, just taking that step.
But let me ask you a question. Why do you feel scared? Do you deal with imposter syndrome? Do you just get nervous easily? Where does the fear come from? Because I used to be, nervous talking in front of people, putting myself out there. Like when I would be in school, for example, I'd give a presentation. Then as soon as I stepped off the stage, I get this huge rush of tingliness and kind of just awkward feeling. But then I see one thing that I've learned lately to do is I've really learned to love who I am, and I really learned to love what I'm about. And and I'm my biggest cheerleader, I'm my biggest fan. And in life, you have to be, because the reason is there will be so many people who will doubt you, who will tell you that your ideas are stupid. And the biggest way to kill a big idea is to tell it to a small person. That is a fact. And if
Yeah,
somebody discredits you, it's probably because they're doing less than you are. Nobody in their right mind who's actively trying is going to put you down for trying. That's the best thing
yeah.
you can do. So, but where does your nervousness come in? What do you deal with that holds you back sometime?
It used to be all imposter syndrome. I was always like, there's someone better than me that you should talk to. I'm sure I have some experiences or I have some knowledge on something, but there is someone who can do it way better than I can. Like, you should go to them. And so that was a big thing, to be like, well, we're all in different levels. I'm at this level right now. I'm not at a higher level of someone else that I look at. But that's okay, because we're all experiencing our different levels. Sorry, I can see the little things popping up. I just got to give a shout out to the Funky Bunch there.
Oh
friends of
yeah, I'm popping them
friends
up.
of
I'm
mine.
sorry those are commenting that we didn't shout you out, but you guys are amazing in the chat. Thank you.
That's okay. Yeah, yeah, that's so cool that you can see kind of the live dialogue. um but yeah, with the imposter syndrome, it used to always feel like I wasn't good enough. And so, I still have those doubts and worries and fears, but now the biggest thing that I struggle with is the memory loss. And I honestly worry all the time, whether I'm talking with you on this podcast where people are going to watch it, or I'm just talking to a friend on the phone. I'm constantly thinking about my memory problems. And when they ask me a question, am I going to be able to remember the answer or remember the name of the place or the person? Or, so I'm always thinking, is it going to come out properly? Or am I going to sound like an idiot who I'm coming across like any other stoner? Oh, look, she smoked too much and she can't get her words out properly. That's the biggest thing for me now is I worry about setting a bad example for cannabis, that because I have, mental faculties that have been affected by my illness, people are going to automatically associate that because I smoke too much weed. Well, maybe if you would lay off the cannabis, you'd have better mental clarity. And so for me, it's gone to the other side where it's not so much I'm worried that I don't fit the bill or I don't have enough knowledge. It's that I'm going to reflect poorly on the industry. And I shouldn't feel that way because that's what cannabis is about. It's all about healing, but there's still such a negative stigma that I don't want to get that lost in what I'm going through when I'm talking about. I don't want people to think that, oh, well, it's because she smokes too much pot. That's the main reason. If she just get off the cannabis, she'd be able to think better to
Or
say that the reason why she's behaving like this is weed, you know?
well, and as a person that does a lot of professional networking, so I own several different companies. I'm usually working with and networking with like other business owners, top level people. I go to a lot of events. And there have been people who are like, it smells like weed in here. And I'm like, yes, I did this smoke. I actually have a cannabis company. Would you like to know about it?
Yeah,
And, it's just one of those things where people are going to judge you, whether you have pink hair. Like my dad, we were in Starbucks the other day. I was in Springfield, Virginia, and I had to go there to see one of my clients. And my dad was in the area. So I stopped by Starbucks to see him. And we're in Starbucks, and he's like, how did you fall so far off the mainstream? And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, the pink hair, the tattoos, the holes in your ear, the cannabis, your dog walking around with you all everywhere. He's like, it's just not normal. And he's like, why don't you just want to be like everybody else? And I'm like, that's exactly
yes,
why I don't want to be. I was like, look around you. Does anybody else have pink hair? Does anybody else have their dog with them? Does anybody else doing this? No, they're not. They're all like
yeah,
living a simulated life, and this is going to bring happiness to them. I just want to be different. As a person, I 2 years ago never would have dyed my hair pink. The reason I did it is because we raised $2,600 for breast cancer at my event, Madman Plants Barbecue Smoke and Smokeout, which is an annual event, which
ah,
brought in almost 400 people, and we cooked 420 pounds of food for free. Me and 8 other people here at my house, my wife included. We had an event. The event was free. The vendors were free. We had public speakers. It was a huge summit. Um, Everything was done by me and my friend GI Genetics, and what do you call it? Because of that, I dyed my hair pink, and now I love it, and now it's the color I'm keeping it. But
yeah,
it's just one of those things where I agree with you. Sometimes, even myself, as much as I love myself and I'm confident and I'm ready to go, I still doubt myself. Like when I was on the plane to Vegas, I dealt with a lot of imposter syndrome. I was like, what have I done to the cannabis industry? Other than
yeah,
podcasting and growing some weed in my house, I haven't really done anything. But then I started at SmokeBusters Media this year. And that's where I'm taking all my interviews, and then I think you've seen a couple of them, my news story
yep,
where like the one I did on Equity Row. So now I'm doing media journalism, and that's what I do for the cannabis industry. I'm a media journalist,
yes,
and outside of that, I'm an influencer who does growing, podcasting, interviewing. But my whole goal is to bring a non-biased educational approach that educates, inspires, and motivates people in the cannabis space, focusing mostly on sales marketing strategies, which is what I do for a living
yep,
outside of cannabis, which I've done much longer than I have inside cannabis. You know what I
yep,
mean? And that's one of the things where it's like, okay, then remember that the next time you don't think that you're very much of yourself, and remember what you did this. And that's why, even for yourself, you should, try to get on more podcasts. Use this as a leverage to get on more podcasts. Be like, hey, listen, Madman Plant, he asked me to be on his podcast. Let me be on yours. I have a great perspective. And next thing you know, now you all have a podcast. And then I'll be on your podcast, dog. And then it just goes full circle. And then everybody gets a piece of the pie and everybody gets to come to play. The market and the free
Yeah.
market is a beautiful place to be. And when you can put yourself and your product, is whether it's yourself or not a physical item, to the forefront and be loved and respected by others, it's a pretty nice thing. But it takes work, it takes dedication, and most of all, like, I don't have a huge following. Like right now, there's not a whole lot of people watching this podcast, but I don't give a shit. I told them before, if there was nobody watching this podcast, I'd still bring my same energy. It's not about them. It never was. It's about
Yeah.
me and what I was building. And some people are like, well, oh, well, you're all about yourself then, if it's all about you. No, it's not. Because
Yeah.
in order to build the best version for somebody to enjoy, I need to build the best version of myself. So talk a little bit
Yeah.
about in the cannabis space. Do you have seeds, like cannabis seeds?
Not currently, because I don't have a setup here for growing or anything like that, so I haven't picked up anything. Like I'd be picking up like you said, a starter and putting it in a pot.
Well, because I could send you some seeds, because I would love for your journey to start growing again. And I could send you some seeds that I
Yay.
have for you to start growing, because I think it's really important that you don't give up. Because my biggest thing is it doesn't matter if the plant dies or lives. Most plants die because humans overdo it.
Yeah.
Secret to life. Secret to life.
Too many
It's mostly
nutrients and
well, yeah, and here's the thing, I'm actually starting a grow online course on my website that actually teaches people, and I'm also starting to focus heavily on specifically women growers, because there's not a lot of people who focus directly on women. And I'm really trying, since I have pink and I love women. Um
yep.
it's a great way because a lot of them are home, or have more access, especially if it's, if the women are at home with the kids, or if the women are working, you have what's called the autopot system, which would be great for you to work in, where you're
Yes.
feeding a reservoir, all gravity fed. And there's even a new deep water culture system now that's an all-in-one that you just fill up with water and their micronized nutrients. It's by
So it's
Current
ADHD
Culture.
friendly.
ADHD friendly, very easy to use, takes minimal time, and can get you growing in no time. And that's the thing, is you just need to kind of just relook at what you're doing, and you'll be like, oh man, that's probably what I did last time. Because they're
Yeah.
like, there's this plant is so resilient that when you get into the heavy veg stage, you can cut the head off of this plant and it will still grow. This plant does not give a fuck. Like,
Yes.
it's just in those baby stages that's sealing and germination where you're a little bit more delicate. But once you know what you're doing, I mean, I really don't baby the plants. And there's a lot of rules that I break that people say that you need to do. And
Yeah.
I kind of have my own, like,
Have
maybe
fans
Gonzo
blowing
style
at
of,
them.
yeah, exactly. But you saw my last harvest, right? My last harvest and
Yeah.
how big the nugs were.
Yes.
Yeah, that was
The
pretty
fact that that
cool.
comes from a homegrown, like, that
3
that
gallon
in itself
pods.
blows my mind that people can get the same quality at home that they would find from a mass grower who's been doing it for 20 years. They can bring home their plant, like you said, get it set up, whether they're doing an inside grow or an outside grow, it just their own stuff, and they're
Yes.
pulling out these massive buds.
It really is. I mean, some people are wicked with autoflowers, and I appreciate that, Tiger TV. That's nice of you. I don't give a shit about how many people watch my thing, because I'm a quality person. So I care about the genuineness, and a lot of times, I think a lot of my contrast with people is a lot of it is more about the nitty gritty. So if you're not about mental health, if you're not about kind of like taking yourself to the next level, or like the things that I talk about, it's not always like the hottest topics. And that's because it's real, it's organic. And
Mm.
I'm really trying to get to the root cause, because as a person that suffers from, with mental health, depression, anxiety, and then I have ADHD, which really isn't mental health, more of a disorder, but
It causes mental health struggles because you're always trying to normalize your behavior.
I guess
Oh,
so.
stop fidgeting because you're drawing attention
Oh
to
yeah, you
yourself.
see
You're
me.
making noise.
That's why I have a million things to do. I'm always doing something.
Yes. Actually, real quick before I forget, because I notice you're a fidgeter, and I've got to share it with you, and I'm going to
Go
send you
for it.
down some.
Yes.
I've got to shout out. I have some
Oh.
friends. They invented this. It's called Caniscoop, and
Oh.
so it's literally. Oh, of course, it's blocking out the letters there, and
Hey,
so it's
it's
literally.
censorship.
Yeah, right. It's like, oh,
I
that's a
don't want
can
to get
word.
sued. Like that's $10,000 for our logo being on there. God damn it!
Ah, failed
She
attempt.
set me up.
Yeah, this is some friends of mine, but they created it's plastic, and you can, well, of course it's blurred, but you can squish it, you can flick it. It's a literally it's a cannabis scoop. But you can play around with it. And I notice you're fidgeting, and these things I'm fidgeting with all the time. So
That's
I'm gonna send you
cool.
down some to play with.
That's awesome. Please do. That is awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
got to shout
Yeah.
out to some friends.
That's really cool. Then they're in Canada as well.
They are, yeah, yeah.
And
And
then
they
go
sorry, I
ahead.
was just gonna say, yeah, he grew up on a farm and
Oh,
used to be cleaning out the of course now I can't remember the name, the grain bins. And they have this unique shovel that because they're metal round storage units. And so they have special shovels that you can get into the edges. And so he had created that, and I actually started using it because of my tremors. Because I can scoop and I'm not like shaking flour out everywhere when I'm trying to get it into either a joint or my bowl or any of that stuff. But the fidgeting aspect, it's one of my favorite things about it. So when I noticed you were fidgeting, I'll have to get you some because they're one of the best accessories for that.
that's awesome. Well, thanks for thinking of me. That's really great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure I'll love that. I always just like things. Now, my thing is I try to be like consistent with certain things. Like I was trying to be consistent with carrying a pocket knife, and then that didn't work. And then I got a glass fidget thing that I used for a couple weeks, and then I forgot to use that again. So my thing is, it's like I need to stick with something, I need to like attach to my body or something.
Yes. See, that's why you also need long hair because then you can just fidget with your hair.
Well, it's funny you say that. I was actually thinking about growing my hair out. I
Full on
actually,
long rock star pink hair.
well, kind of like it'd be like kind of like the same. I'd have it like the same way where it would come down, but I'm
Yep.
deciding on how long. I thought it'd be kind of cool if it came down to like at least like my shoulder.
Yep.
But then there's another hairstyle where it's a little bit longer, but it's more of a comb over. But I've never had long hair before, and I think I might like it. But then I'm gonna really freak out my dad. Be like, "Now I got pink long hair, bitch." I'm just kidding.
He's turning into a hippie. We've lost him.
Oh yeah, well once I started smoking weed, they already knew I was going down a dark path. But I will say this: I've never had a bad experience. Knock on wood, honey.
Yep.
Honey, be nice to that cat. Stop messing with it. Stop messing with it. Sexy dog. Yeah, dude, this dog
She's like, I'm too
and
cute.
me,
I'm gonna do it. You're gonna let me.
we're we're a bonded pair, me and Honey. We go
Yes.
everywhere together.
Yes, I love that. I love that you guys do matching outfits. As soon as I
Yes.
saw that, I showed my husband. I'm like, look, see, he does it.
Oh, it's the cutest thing. And I always tell people if I want to look really like Honey, I'll put on the matching hoodies, and then I'll put on khaki pants and then white shoes, and then I'll have the socks and the brown legs just like her, and we'll look just like each other.
Yes. What we need to do is we're gonna have to get you a hoodie with her face all over it, and then we'll get her one with your face all over it.
That's hilarious. Oh my God, that is genius. That is grand.
We're gonna find someone to make that for you. That's got to happen.
That, yeah, no, that has to happen. That is hilarious.
Oh man, now you're
No,
gonna like start having a lot of pop-ups come on your Instagram and your Amazon. It's
good.
all gonna be like, oh, here you can submit your picture for your own outfits.
Yeah, get sublimated doggy hoodie, $10
Yeah,
on Timu.
yeah. Although check those dimensions because guaranteed it'll show up and it'll be like a quarter of the size it's supposed to be.
What's up, Litwick? Yeah, no, another day I actually saw somebody. Now, this was AliExpress. He put it on the local page, so I know like it's a legit, post.
Yep.
But he ordered a tool set on AliExpress, and they sent him a box with the picture of the tool set in the box. That's what you get for trying to save money. So that means if it's too good to be true, it probably is.
Stuff like that. Like, of course, you're very frustrated when it finally arrives, but the person who shipped it must have been killing themselves.
Oh yeah, they knew. They knew.
To me,
I
that's an
did.
awesome prank.
Well, yeah, and it's in China or Mexico or wherever it is. So it's like, what are you gonna do? You know what I mean? It's
Exactly.
That's the only
You take a
problem.
picture and share it with others.
Yeah, it's the only problem I don't like about necessarily about what do you call it? Alibaba and everything is because they don't respect trademark laws. So that's why if
Yeah.
you're gonna white label a product, white label one that already exists. So then you're using their product line.
Yes, exactly. And you're getting it for way cheaper.
Thanks for the shout out. No problem, Lit. And thank you for watching me, dude. I really appreciate that. Lots of great things coming to the channel and for you guys.
Yes. Yeah, you've got some really cool things coming up.
Well, you do too. So what do you have this year? What do you are you going to any big events? Are you doing anything different?
Yeah, I'd like to hit up some events. Obviously due to health issues, one day can be very different from the next. So my goal is
Mm-hmm.
to actually get to some events this year, especially now that I'm seeing a lot more of the accessibility areas coming up where well, you had met Thunder Walker, and so she's
Yep.
doing, when she does events, she's got a decompression area where you can go, if you're getting overwhelmed by all the sounds or the sights, or you can step away and have your space, or if you need to sit down, those accommodations are starting to become more popular at the cannabis events, which makes it a
Mm,
lot easier for people like myself where you can't walk for extended periods of time without needing a break, or where you can go and do a bit but you need to rest and kind of step away. So knowing that those facilities are accommodating in that format makes it a little bit easier to plan in advance to attend, so that, well, if you're having a flare up or anything like that, you can still participate and have the same experiences. You're just going about it in a different format. So I do want to be able to get to some more events this year. I want to be able to get down to some in the US if possible as well. Check out what you guys are going on, down there. The Vegas events always look incredible. But what I'm doing is I've actually just started a company with Scott Ross, also known as Scotty G from the Funky Bunch. And so we're launching a cannabis company and we're going to be doing consulting services. So through that, our game plan for the year is to be able to get to a few events, help sponsor a few events, be able to put out a few, if we're wanting to do a collaboration with someone for an event, maybe do like a lounge space and stuff like that. So we're wanting to be a little bit more integrated into the community on that aspect with Cannabis Lane, and things like yourself where it's podcasts, getting to know the community, and just seeing the playing field in Canada versus the US, because obviously Scott Ross, he is in the US, but the landscape between the two countries, even though we're right next door, we can't share cannabis across the border like I would love us to be able to do. So those are some of the things that we want to be able to showcase what Canada has to offer. What events are going on. If you're going to be traveling to Canada, some places that you can check out, or maybe some recommended strains, and just really bring Canada to the forefront in the cannabis industry, and not just be the you know what's the word, everybody just views us as like the little brother to the US kind of thing, and it's like, oh yeah, maybe I'll go to Canada and check it out. But no, like, let's actually get you guys coming to Canada and make a cool event, or if you're going to stay at a cannabis friendly Airbnb type situation, and draw people up. Like, we've got lots to offer, and tours and stuff like that. So that's our goal for 2025, is to really get Cannabis Lane's name out there, and draw people in. The Lane name in itself, let's carpool together kind of thing, and everybody go on that Cannabis Lane together.
Tiger, I will be at Fire on the Mountain. I'm a special guest. And Litwick says, Sasha, if you fly me out, I'd love to accompany you to the event and make it as early as possible on you. Hope that's not creepy sounding. I mean well. I'm sure he does mean well. You're awesome, Litwick.
I love that. Yes, thank you, Litwick. Actually, reach out on my Instagram, send me a message. It's at Sacha Canico. Sacha is how my name's actually spelled, but I use the S so people understand how to say it. Sacha. I get a lot of Sachas, or people put the S in anyway. So yeah, you can find me at Sacha Canico. I'd love to collaborate and see what we can do events wise, and normalize it. We've got to, I mean, you guys down in the States, you've got such big events. They're powerhouses. And we've kind of got that here in Canada, but not to the same level. And I'd love to see that come here, where champs, and of course now I just forgot the
Well, right
biggest big
now in
show.
Vegas, they're MJ BizCon, and then they
Yes.
also have the Total Products Expo, which I wish I was at Vegas right now, but I'm here sitting in my basement talking to you. Not which I wouldn't be
Right.
rather be anywhere else. Don't get me wrong, but I love going to my playground.
Yes, that's the biggest thing, right? Is you get to see all of the new tech and the glass, and it's one thing watching it on social media and seeing it, but it's another thing when you actually get to be there in person and pick up these
Yes.
products and try them and talk to people, and that's the biggest thing. It's a cannabis community. Everybody who smokes and meets someone else who smokes, you're instant friends. And so to have that on a massive scale, where you've got big American players coming into the Canadian market, and seeing what we're doing here, and collaborating, or bringing Canadian products to the US, or vice versa, we can dominate the industry, but not in a negative way, where we're showcasing what we can do, even if on a legislation side of how to manage these events, and then help all of these other countries that are starting their legalization process. And here's how we run things, and it's been working pretty well for the past 5 years, 6 years, and just sharing that then with the rest of the world, where they're catching up to the point that we're at now.
No, I definitely like that, and I would love to get to Canada. So we definitely have to plan it out for me to get out there too. Although I think I need a
Absolutely.
passport. Last time I was in Canada, I went to Niagara Falls and I stayed at a hotel directly across from the Hooters at Niagara Falls.
Yeah.
I was 18 years old with my dad, and we did a giant road trip together. It was one of our last road trips that we'd done, but now I actually need to get him to do another road trip with me. Because I want to get
Up to
back to a
Canada
couple
again.
places. Well, Canada was pretty cool because see, in Canada, the drinking age is 18. So when we were in Canada, I was able to have alcohol because I was able to have it at duels, which is
Hmm.
non-alcoholic beer, and it was pretty awesome. And we got to stay right over the Niagara Falls, but that's the farthest
Yeah.
I've been into Canada. And you guys drive a lot slower than we do too, because you
Well,
guys
it
drive
depends
in
on where you are.
because you drive in
Big cities.
kilometers.
Oh my gosh, that was one thing I loved. My family was big on road trips as well, and so we did a lot of them when I was younger. And I remember my dad and I, when I got my not my driver's license, but my learner's permit, we were doing a road trip down to we went through Vegas and then we have some friends in 30 minutes from Canada. Ah, so she's close. Awesome. Right on the border. Uh, Detroit. Okay, so she's close to the Toronto area in around the Great Lakes. Awesome, Litwick. I can't wait to chat with you more about some cross-border stuff. But yeah, so going on the road trips down to the States, we get on the freeway and it was like literal night and day as soon as we crossed the border onto the freeways in the States. The highways, like, they're wide and they're paved so nicely and they've got all the markers, and all of a sudden, instead of going 60 miles an hour on our speed limit, you can go 75.
Oh,
So,
nice.
as a new driver, it was like, "Oh, I can speed," and, like, it's still legal. So that was one of my favorite things going to the States.
Suckers.
Yes, us and our slow speed limits up here.
I know.
Uh
What else is there? So you've been to the United States before, though.
Yes, yeah, yeah, I've been down to California, I've been to Vegas, I've been to
Okay, so you've been
Florida.
to Vegas. What'd you do in Vegas?
So I was young, I was not legal age. It was my dad had a convention to go to, and so
Oh, your
I was
dad's
just
in the
young.
trade space too.
No, no, not in cannabis. My dad's passed, unfortunately. He had
I'm so sorry to
cancer,
hear
and
that. You had
yeah,
mentioned
so
that.
yeah, yeah, unfortunately, the third time it came back, it was too much for
Mm.
him to do treatment
What
to,
type of
yeah,
cancer was it?
colon cancer.
Ooh,
Yes.
man, I just had a colonoscopy literally
Yes.
last week. Yeah, and that's so unfortunate because if caught early, that is one of the easiest ones to treat. Well, tell us a
Yeah.
little bit about that and his situation.
Yeah, so he got colon cancer, and unfortunately, he was one of those people where he had no symptoms until it was too late. And so he had just noticed, of course, I'm sorry for anyone who has a hint of hypochondriac because you're gonna go crazy every time you have a backache, but that's how it started for him. It was just he
Wow, okay.
felt like he pulled a muscle in his back and it wouldn't go away. And then all of a sudden he couldn't go to the bathroom, and it had been a few days, and it started to get to a point where it's like, okay, well, this isn't normal, maybe I should go look into it. And they just treated it like normal old age constipation kind of thing. Here, have some
Mm,
laxatives and wait a few days and come back and see where we're at. And he did everything he was going to. My dad was also one of those people, he never got sick, and if he did, it was just a bad case of the flu, and within a few days he was fine.
yep,
So,
yep.
he didn't think too much of it. And finally, it was over a week of him dealing with this. And so he went in, they did scans and found he had a massive tumor in his intestines. So he had surgery, and they took out the whole section of the bowel where the tumor was. So before and after, to make sure they isolated the entire thing, stitched him back up and said we were successful. And
Cancer free.
unfortunately, yeah, so they thought. But unfortunately, a couple years later, it did come back. So he had in Canada, it was actually kind of a new. I think the term was high pec surgery, and so typically they would do the surgery for women who had ovarian cancer. So they cut you open and they dump chemo into your body. it
Oh
was all
man.
in his intestinal walls and stuff. So yeah,
Ugh.
they basically did this advanced surgery with him. They did the high pec surgery, and they were pretty confident in it, and he responded very well. And that's
That's
when he
not that. There
also
wasn't like a lot of pain and sickness. All that radiation dumped on him like that.
my dad's one of those people that even when he was going through chemo, a lot of people, they lose their hair, they lose a
Yeah,
lot of
yeah.
weight. My dad, to look at him, you would have
Wow,
never known that he had progressive stage 4 cancer
it's
because he was
amazing.
still lively, and yeah, he had all his hair. He managed very well going through the treatments. But when it had come back the second time, because they were going to be doing this newer type of surgery that they usually only did on women, and it was more prevalent in the US than Canada. He was also doing some other supplemental treatments. So that's where he started using cannabis oil to help with his pain. And, going from a very religious upbringing and to where now my dad's actually trying some cannabis products before I did. Like I had tried, similar experience to you where you try smoking it with your friends and you don't really feel anything. So then
Yep,
it's
yep.
weeks before you try it again. And so here's my dad actually finding it's helping his pain, and he didn't really have too many problems with his appetite. My dad's a pretty hardy guy. But the pain and the being able to sleep comfortably, those were big struggles for him. And so he started using cannabis for that. And then unfortunately, he was in remission for a little while, came back the third time, and unfortunately it
Mm,
metastasized to his lungs and some of his other internal organs. So at that point, it was just
too
palliative
late.
care and
Yeah.
yeah, giving him the best quality of life at the end. And so again, yeah, he was using some of the cannabis oil that he had gotten from some local friends and doing that. He was a little unnerved by the psychedelic effects that he had from it. So, it kind of he would only do it in the evenings to help him go to bed. He had a hard time feeling comfortable, during the daytime interacting with people while he was on
Yeah,
cannabis.
unless you've and I was the exact same way when I first started smoking weed later in life. I could not have a conversation with you. I would have to sleep it off.
Yeah,
I would freak out. My heart would race. I could definitely couldn't drive a car or go out to eat
yeah,
or be in public at all. Like, I would sit here like I need to go to sleep. I'm
yeah.
really stoned. And
And people can probably tell that I'm stoned.
yeah, and now, I mean, I think that, but I think also that's part of that work through, and obviously your dad's worrying about way more stuff than controlling his high. But I definitely think that it's one of those things where it's kind of like you kind of you have to learn how to be tipsy. You know what I mean? You have to learn how to control that so you can enjoy the
Exactly.
longevity of your night, or else you're gonna get drunk, pass out, and then your night's over. And nobody wants that. So people know how to
Yes.
gauge their alcohol throughout the night.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And unfortunately for him, it wasn't something that he did long enough to
Yeah.
get to that comfortable state. And
But I
of
just
course,
love
then it
the
was
fact
also.
that go ahead, sorry.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say it was more of than managing his condition. It got to the point where he was on morphine and stuff like that. So hardcore medications that he couldn't do cannabis in the
Yeah,
palliative
and
center,
and
anyways.
honestly, when you have that like all that going, you probably don't even need cannabis to be honest in
Yeah,
a in all sense.
yeah,
Don't mean to
yeah.
make light of your dad's situation.
No,
I
but
don't
that's
want you to
that's
come off that
exactly
way
what it
or whatever.
is. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's something that
Sometimes I can be condescending is what people say, where it's not what I say, it's how I say things that upset people sometimes. So I'm
yeah, I
working on
totally
it.
get
But
that.
then again,
Yeah,
I'm
no,
still unapologetic. I'm just kidding.
right, yeah. No, you can take it as it is. No, I appreciate the kindness and understanding because yeah, it was a very difficult situation and there's still a lot of hurt and pain over the loss. But gosh, since losing him, I've felt so much of his influence in my life that the more I talk about him and the longer it's been since he's passed, the more it feels like he's still very much a part of me, and like I still have that connection with him. It's just in a different format now, you know, and to see so many things in my life that has happened since he passed, that it all kind of started with him doing that bit of cannabis oil for his support. And my dad, I looked up to him my entire life, and nothing ever phased him. Like I said, he never got sick. Like, he was just a powerhouse. And so to have that little influence and then see some of the people that he, like Cheech and Chong, he loved Cheech and
Mhm.
Chong. He thought their movies were hilarious. He religious, right? But wicked sense of humor. He always appreciated good comedy. And a few months after he had passed, I ended up seeing Cheech in the airport.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, yeah. My husband had actually won a trip through his company, and we happened to be in the Miami airport. And who's going through security but Cheech? And I was like, oh my God, like, mind blowing. This is the first time I've ever seen a big celebrity in person, and who is it but one of the people that would make my dad laugh the most.
Were you able to
And
tell Cheech the story?
eventually, not at that time, but
Okay.
fast forward a couple years, where I end up being one of the 420 people that Cheech and Chong followed. And
Wow.
if anybody doesn't know, they have a space called Bullmates. And so you can go
Okay.
on, it's their website. It's all of their cannabis products and stuff, but it's a community. And so you can have the opportunity to actually chat with Cheech and Chong. They're very much a part of the community on there. They read the messages and check the posts. And so I happened to see that they were doing these live chats, and I joined in, and happened to be able to interact with them. And from there, it just spawned this journey where, like I said, I got to be one of the people they followed back, and having some interactions with them, and where they share one of my posts on their stories, those little things that, like, as a not just a cannabis consumer, but as a fan, that you're like, oh my God, but you
They know
see,
me. They recognize
right?
me.
Yeah, they've said
I'm
my
somebody
name.
in their world.
Yes, I saved that screenshot. When I'm 80, I'm probably gonna print it out and put it up on the wall and be like,
That's
back in my
awesome.
day. But seeing those little things where I I get to experience my dad through my life and my journey, and so it's like having little connection points with him throughout this. And the more I've delved into my cannabis journey and unraveling all of those childhood and adult and teenage traumas, and processing and getting back to, like, who I am, and figuring out me as an individual, but then also respecting my family, my ancestors, everyone down the line who lived their life up until now I've entered into the universe. To see all of that come full circle, and all of those connections and family points and locations, it just, it like I said, it makes me feel like he's still very much a part of my life, and getting to be a part of that journey in a different way. And so it's transformed that heartache to again feeling that sense of community, and being even more in love with the cannabis community, because it's brought me closer to my dad,
That's
in a weird
cool.
way. So yeah, and in conversations like this, it just how they all come about. And again, being able to talk about him and what he went through, and that being a stepping stone for breaking stigmas, helping introduce people to maybe alternative treatments for conditions that they didn't think about. So it just, it's cool to be able to still share his life with anyone who happens to interact with myself, or this video, or Instagram, or any of these little things. And so that, to me, that's just another one of those reasons why cannabis is so special, because it's that plant, it brings us down to the roots, but then it's like that whole network system of connected roots, that it ties into this family tree and this family tree and this group over here. And we all, again, we feel connected when we get right down to the basics and we just start talking.
Well, there's a saying that says there's two types of death that a person will experience in their life. There's the death that when your heart stops beating for the last time, and there's also the death of your name being spoken for the last time. And the beautiful thing about what you're doing in both of these spaces is you're keeping that name and that person very much alive. And that's, I think, also the sense and satisfaction that you feel is, it's a duty and, in your case, an honor to be able to, correlate the two. And then it makes smoking much better. And that's what I was
Yeah.
talking about earlier. It's like, when you can connect the dots on an emotional level versus an intellect or a logical sense of level, it can have the opportunity to change and open up doors that other things typically can't. And I think that's so great because, as a father myself, I would love if something happened to me and, like, let's say Logan was into cannabis, for Logan to think, well, my dad was a grower and he loved cannabis and, I feel connected to him. And I think that is just so cool because, that's your way of dealing with it, and I've fortunately, knock on wood, have not lost my father
Yep.
yet. And I hope that it's a very long time. And I'm so sorry that you've lost yours. But, to be able to deal with that and be able to talk about it, I don't know what it's like. And unfortunately, long time now. One day we'll all as people who are alive will know what that's like. Well, I guess Lacey won't because Lacey's never met her dad, so it's a little bit different. But
But I'm
it,
sure she's got father-like figures in her life that
me, no, I'm just kidding.
him, yeah.
That's a little bit weird.
Yeah, daddy. That's
I'm
for
your
the
dad.
bedroom.
Yes, call me daddy. I wish she was watching.
But
Why
no,
aren't
I
you
totally
watching the good videos? You never saw my jokes.
you're
That's
gonna have to
funny.
make sure she sees that one later.
Yeah, I will actually. But
Because we were talking about you today.
yeah, and then I'm like, I'll give it the context. I'll just be like, hey, we're talking about you.
Yeah. And how you call me daddy in the bedroom.
That's a dream. But no, but all back to all seriousness though. I just think it's cool because in situations like that, a lot of this is where, people are forgotten. And when it comes back to like legacy and just thought and you being able to share that story and how cannabis has moved, it's just all about breaking the stigma. And that's what I really enjoy about these conversations is it's much more than just the getting high. And I think
Yeah.
when you enter the level of cannabis as an industry, as a professional, as all of this stuff, you see, and that's why are you gonna try to go to MJ BizCon this year?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yes, there has been so many people where like I've seen them, I've been following it for the past few years and I see them every year and I'm like, oh, next year. But now, no, this year it's happening. I'm
All
putting
right.
it out there, so I've got to make it happen.
Well, this will be my 4th year there. And I'm pretty excited about it consecutively in the row. It's funny, and that's the one thing about dreaming and everything is, I once thought that Vegas is like some place I'd go like maybe like once or twice in my life,
Yeah.
never knowing that I'd be going to conventions out there every year for let alone cannabis. You
Yeah.
know what I
And for
mean?
your job.
Yeah, yeah, and for my job, because it's how I make money now, so it's just one of those things where it's just it's just so interesting because I think as individuals, and I love my parents very much, but my parents have been always one of those, you know, both have degrees. My dad went to Kings Point in New York, which is a military. Oh, it's a Navy school. Um, and then my mom went to Virginia Tech, and there's very straight edge, no drugs, no alcohol.
Yeah.
You
Strict,
know,
professional.
well, not even strict. They weren't. We just never had it in the house, so I guess it was never an issue. But they were never strict. My parents, I will say this, I got very lucky because one, I'm adopted from Romania. So I was chosen out of an orphanage at 2 years old in a room full of other babies. So they could have chose somebody else to have
And
pink
you're like,
hair.
pick me.
So, no, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
How did I fall so off the mainstream? Well, you had your option there, kid. You could have picked somebody
Yeah.
else. So
Wait,
that's a you
that's
problem,
crazy
all
on its
right?
own. Yeah.
How could you
No take
pick a kid
backsies.
so far off the mainstream?
Yes. Remember, you chose this, so
Yeah, you wanted this. You like this.
yes.
So, but no, it's just one of those things where even to them, this is just so just so out there. Like, what are you doing? Like, they just don't even see they don't. And I think, like I was talking about earlier, it's just they don't know what they don't know. It's a generational gap where reefer madness, war on drugs, all
Yeah,
this other stuff. And I think that's one thing I love about the newer generation is we seem to be way more exploratory in different genres and different sceneries and different environments. And I
yeah,
think when it comes to change, you have to be open minded.
absolutely. Well, change is one of the only things that is constant. You can always bank on change happening. You can try to resist it as much as you want, but you can't stop it. There's always going to
Mm.
be someone younger or, coming from a different location that's got a different perspective than you. And they're going to say, why are you doing it that way? Like, come on, this is the new way to do it. And it keeps us young in some ways. It keeps us adaptable. And it reminds us that you can't get so stuck in one thing because one day it's going to change. And most of the time, change is for the better. And especially if we can be open to it, this whole cannabis situation, this is a great opportunity for change, because it's something different than it used to be. And we're in that age now of technology where we can change the stigma on a massive scale. It's not so grassroots where you had to focus on different formats of media. It was newspaper or the odd TV show that was broadcast nationally. We're not limited in that. And so we can change a lot quicker, but then you still have people where they were in the previous times where things moved a little slower, and it takes them a little longer to get used to the new situations. But that's where breaking the stigma comes. The stigmas come from everywhere, whether it's old age or from the professional community, any of that stuff. There's stigmas all around, and so we're able to open up those conversations and bring about the change a little more rapidly, and to suit everyone and their different needs. There's a lot of older consumers where they got started out because they came into a dispensary, or there's the younger generation where they're seeing it online and they're not of age to smoke yet, but they're seeing the information come out and that more and more people their parents age are consuming. And so it's got that effect on both sides where now the younger people, they can come to their grandparents and say, hey, I saw this article, I noticed your CBD cream on your nightstand or whatever. You can have those cross generational conversations again, where my it was my great grandma, I do believe. She was in BC actually, and she used to trade eggs to the local guy for cannabis. He was a grower, and so she would grow, she had her chickens, and so she would harvest the eggs, and then that was her exchange for her evening cannabis to help her pain and sleep. So we can bring back those conversations again where it's like, oh yeah, actually. I remember being a young kid and my aunt or my grandma or my brother, and bringing back again those changes of it's just a different timeline. We're just putting it into the future now and getting the young kids talking about it, but in a safe format again, like it was before, where you would pass down those stories and those experiences. And, so we're doing that in a different way. It's just changed a little bit, but still the same, and it's getting people comfortable again. Just a new change. And again, I'm 5 years from now, cannabis is going to look completely different again. There's going to
Yeah,
be
yeah.
different consumption formats, and like the science is always growing, and so we have to get used to the change, but being open to it and how we can not control it, but help guide it in the right way, so it's not changing for the worse. It's changing for the better.
Well, yeah, and another thing too, especially focusing like on Equity Row, which is really cool. Which I'm really glad that I was able to do that little expose on because I spent a lot of time talking to people there.
Yep.
Is also paying this forward in a way to those who have already lost so much to due to the war on drugs, or to the people that are or still being incarcerated for cannabis, because people still to this day, even today, I'm sure in the world, have been arrested for cannabis alone. And it's one of those things where the real future of this too is not only just having these conversations, but and that's why I've turned myself into a news outlet as well, is collecting these conversations and then creating a voice, and then a unified voice, and moving that voice together. And the problem with most people is we're all here for our own reasons, and not everybody's reasons align with it. Just because we're all related in the sense that we love cannabis and we like to smoke does not mean our values and purposes in cannabis are the same. And I
Yep.
think that's also something that needs to be recognized, is just like, the incarceration and prisoners is, and, mental health and all this other stuff. You can't look at it as a community as a whole. You have to individualize it, because different people have different values and different things that they want out of this. Some people just want something that helps them sleep, and then other than that, they could give a shit less about any bills or whatever.
Yep.
Wherever they get it, whether it's a gas station or some guy on the street or they know somebody. And then you have other people, it's just different levels. That's why I say
Yep.
in cannabis, it's really a spectrum, like a wavelength of different situations and stuff. And I just think it needs to be like kind of more like the free the plant, in the sense that um the way we utilize it and think about it versus the way that it's actually portrayed, type deal.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah, and some of the people who are portraying it in the negative light, even though they're trying to do it responsibly, are the actual provincial or state organizations, because they're so concerned with kids, finding the appeal in cannabis and consuming before they should. And a lot of us, we've learned through the science that it can affect brain development in kids under 18. And we don't want to be encouraging them to go consume cannabis throughout their school day or before they've got an exam. Like we still want to promote responsible consumption, but we still have to educate them in a way that kids aren't stupid. They're hearing their older brother who's in university, or, they're hearing somebody or seeing somebody consume or talk about it. And so we can't maintain that scare tactic of like, oh, it's so dangerous, and here's the stats against cannabis, because we went through the same thing in school with mad, and we know it was bullshit. Once we learned more, we then now distrust that source of information. And so when you're still seeing them stick with the old narrative of negative focus and you shouldn't do this, it causes that restriction where people are like, well, why? And if you tell me I can't or I shouldn't, well, now I want it even more. And so,
Hmm.
just trying to help the ones putting in those policies and advertisement controls to help them change the connotation where we can't have that negative views anymore. We've got to be more educational and informative. You got to put the onus back on the people where it's like, here's the actual information. And now you can take that back. And does that fit with my lifestyle, my needs, any of that stuff? But to just be like, nope, this is bad, don't do it. You're not actually helping them know why they shouldn't or why they should. And, that's just one of those challenges that we get to take on as people in the industry who, like you said, some they just want to consume and be done with it. But there's other ones like ourselves where we're very passionate and we see all of these little things and it's like, oh, if we could just change that a little bit, it would open it up for so many more people or whatever the situation is. And that's where everybody, we all have our little piece to play. There's going to be people who are just the consumers and they're using the products that are out there, and then you'll have the people focusing on policy changes, people focusing on events, and so we all have our piece in the puzzle and helping it come to now the new modern day age of consumption and natural health products and even on the topic of natural health products, just showing that you have to have the same care and concern over your cannabis products as you do getting vitamins. Not all of them are made in the same process where they're using safe chemicals or packaging or so it's just taking it like any other industry or product on the market and just putting in a different set of standards that it's tailored to that industry and still normalizing it where it's like, yeah, just be responsible, do your due diligence, but we can't treat people like idiots anymore and hope that the fear mongering, prevents kids from consuming. Like it can't come down to that simple of a message where it's like, no, just listen to me because I said so. you know,
Yeah,
we can't
no,
act like the father.
I definitely agree. All right, well, we got 10 minutes left of the podcast. So what I like to do is open it up to you if there's anything that we haven't talked about or you want to talk about to wrap it up with.
Oh gosh, now I feel like I'm on that Hot Ones show and where they're like, okay, here's the final
Here's
pack
your
it all in.
question. Mhm.
Yeah. I think we've covered it all. Basically, just getting the message out there that it's normalize things. Be part of the conversation. If you have questions, there's in cannabis, there's no dumb questions because we're still learning. They've
Mm.
just opened up the ability for a lot more locations to be able to do the scientific testing and the research where they've got participant controls. It's not just animal controls. So it's still evolving, it's still new, even for people who have been in it for decades. We're still progressing and that's the biggest thing is just learn a little bit more, ask people, Google, cautionly, obviously, make sure you're finding trusted sources. And if you can't, I mean, hop on Instagram and guaranteed you type in cannabis and you're going to find so many people like yourselves where you've done educational components or interviews, reviews, all of that stuff where you can find those trusted sources and just making it more commonplace for people.
No, I couldn't agree more. I think the biggest thing is just being involved, getting passionate, which you obviously, even though you're not growing, you still have a lot of passion in the cannabis space. And that's one of the best things is, and that's why I call it a spectrum because it doesn't matter where you are, whether you've grown for 20,000 years or not. This is a movement. This is a way of expression. This is art. This is therapy. This is a lot of different things tied in
Yeah.
one. And when you can combine it all and make sense of it all, it really makes a difference.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing, we all have to start somewhere, but it's just start. That's all.
Mhm.
Just take that first step, and it's scary. So taking the first step of being on the podcast, as we talked about, but you just take that step and then you take another, and before you know it, you're running.
Well, as we end or get close to our end here, I want to read something that you wrote. And this says a little bit about me, part two. After my medical cannabis appointment in March, I felt like I had ran a marathon. It was so much more of an emotional experience than I experienced while sitting in the office or in that office. To have a doctor truly listen to me and tell me he gets it and it's not all in my head, to tell me that he found medical explanations for my pain on my x-rays, to tell me that I can use cannabis as a complement to my other medications, that there are so many new ways that I can support my healing and manage my pain. I felt grief over the years of being told my pain is just depression and the mental health toll that it takes on a person, and that I had waited so long to try cannabis. I felt that relief. I found something that helps. Isn't that cool? And you wrote that.
Yep. And I still remember that feeling like it was yesterday. It literally life changing. It sounds so cliche, but it did. It changed my life, and I wouldn't be where I am. I would still be basically bedbound, relying on opiates every day just to function and get out of bed
Yeah.
and do those basic mundane tasks that you take for granted. Standing and washing dishes. That's something I wasn't able to do until I found cannabis. And that's the biggest thing. If I can help someone else just even consider cannabis and start that research journey to find that relief. I mean, it brought me to tears because it's that loss of what you were able to do before, but then you also feel the loss of, God, if I had only tried this 2 months, 6 months, 2 years sooner, what would my life be like?
Mhm.
And that's the biggest thing, is just looking into it and trying, because you don't know. There's a lot of people, they smoke a sativa and it makes them paranoid, and they're like, oh, not for me.
Yeah.
And that's okay. But maybe you're going to be like me, where it has such a profound effect on your mental and physical health that it feels like you got your life back. Then by all means, go down that rabbit hole and take that first step, because you're not going to regret it. And if you're one of those people that you try it and it's not for you, that's okay, because not everything is going to be for everyone, but it's going to be for someone.
No, that's awesome. That's a great way to close this out.
It's almost like I planned that.
Right? It's almost like we planned it.
I swear, no scripting required.
Right? Well, we've talked for 2 hours and 30 minutes.
Gosh, you're right. Like it's gone by so quick.
How long do you think we've been on?
If I had to, like, I wasn't looking at a clock and you didn't just say it's been, 2.5 hours, I would say maybe 45 minutes, maybe,
That's what most
you
people
know?
say.
Yeah, because it just, you get in that chat and you're going back and forth. It feels like you've been talking, you get on the phone with your best friend at 9 o'clock at night, and all of a sudden you're like, oh shit, it's 3 in the morning, you know?
That's awesome. Well,
Yeah,
I really appreciate you being on here. You provided so much value and we had so much great storytelling. And the biggest thing is just being yourself and telling these stories and allowing these stories to define you and help define other narratives. And that's the biggest thing, is when you find something you're passionate about and you work really, really hard on that, you reap the reward in whatever aspect that might be, whether it's clarity, whether it's, expression, whether it's, just gratitude, just a lot of different things that you can wind up with. So it's
yeah.
really awesome to bring you on. How can people find and support you?
So they can find me on Instagram at Sacha Canico. And then also we had touched on the Cannabis Lane company that I've co-founded with Scott Ross. So you can find us at cannabislane.ca for our website. You can reach out to us on there or on Instagram, and you can also find us at Cannabis Lane Co. On Instagram as well.
Well, I definitely want to get connected with the companies too, because I would love to see if you guys want to be a part of kind of what we have going on here this year. But
Absolutely.
that is awesome, guys. I really think that's just really cool. And I appreciate everybody that tuned in to watch this. It was a really great episode. Stay on because I'm going to end the podcast, but you'll stay on it. I'll let you know when we're off. But in the
Okay, you'll do the wrap up.
yep. So in the meantime, everybody, we have a lot more coming to you, and I promise you within weeks I'll be able to say a lot more. It's just sometimes when I'm dealing with different companies and stuff like this, it takes a lot of time because in the corporate world, things move very slow to the entrepreneurial world, which everything rides on a balance. So you
Yes.
know what I mean? There's a huge contrast when it comes to movement, speed, and the motivation to get things done. But we are
Yep.
getting things done, and a lot of great things are coming. And my biggest thing is, um, it's all about you. It's all about the value that we create and the vision that we, put out there. And my thing is you just lock onto something that you love and just go for it. You just don't understand where it would take you. Sometimes it does involve being your own cheerleader, and it does involve sometimes, sitting by yourself, for example, no one watching. I'm just kidding. No,
Yeah.
and I'm telling the truth. But no, and the reality of the situation is you have to be the one doing this for you. And when
Yeah.
you do it through pure intention and through the love that like you're getting the satisfaction out of it because operating is what gives you that drive, all that value, everything that you're looking for follows that. The
Yeah.
biggest thing is you just gotta find inspiration in anything that you surround yourself because so many people, that's why they say the graveyard is one of the richest places in the world because that's where people go to die. And that's because all those ideas, all those creative abilities, all those people who truly wanted to be themselves, whether they had pink hair or tutus or whatever would be, all
Yeah.
of that died with them. And some of those things never got to change the world. And you have an opportunity as a person to make a name for yourself, to change the world, to do whatever you want to do. The ability to be free born and human is just we have to remember this. We all are the fastest of the egg out of 12 million sperm. All of us got here. And do you know the complications of childbirth alone, especially back
Yep.
from when our generation was to now? You know what I mean? So you're seeing the
It's a
show A Thousand
miracle.
Ways to Die. It's
Yes.
it's like with every day and all the situations, it's a miracle that we are here every day. Like,
Yes. It absolutely when you actually think about it on the grand scheme of things, and that everything has come together to literally this moment here, and you and I sitting down having this conversation. It's a miracle,
mhm,
and it's cool to be able to look back at, like you said, where we've had those moments where we were ready to flick off the switch and say, I can't do anymore.
yeah,
And to have made it past and then come to this point, yeah, absolutely. It's inspiring, it's magical, it's so special, and
it
for
is
us to
magical.
be
That's
able
actually a
to,
great way to put it.
yeah, to come on through the other side and be like, I'm so glad I made it through that dark point, and just realize that it's darkest just before the dawn and tomorrow's a new day. There's always another chance to start over, and you never know where it's going to lead you.
100%. See, we've left this chat very empowering. Whoever's going to watch this is going to feel really good about themselves after they get off this.
Yes, as long as they watch it all the way through.
Watch it all
And
the
we
way
saved the
through.
goodies. Yeah, for the very end. You got to watch all the way through to get that little golden nugget.
Well, this is awesome. Sasha, thank you so much for being
Thank
on. I
you.
really
Thank
do
you so
appreciate
much.
this. This has been awesome. We'll definitely have to have you on again.
Absolutely. We'll
For
bring
every
the Funky Bunch guys. They can do a little musical gig and
that
do some
that'd
free
be
entertainment.
awesome. Let me know. We could schedule it sooner than later. That would be great. I actually have a
Absolutely.
DJ. Once I redo the basement, he's gonna come here and do a live set here on the podcast. So that's gonna be cool. Oh man, she's frozen in time, people. She is frozen in time. Look at that.
Oh, there we go. You were frozen there for a moment. I got you have a DJ, and that's the last thing I heard.
I just fucking with you. I wasn't really frozen.
I was like, it happened again, didn't it?
No, I'm just gonna.
Awkward. See, you could be one of those still actors, like the CSI people where they
Do
play
you
dead.
see how fidgety I am? I'd be like ADHD. Oh fuck.
Yeah. Oh, I'm itchy.
Oh, fuck.
Oh, damn. Reset.
And then with all the good girls looking by, I'd be like, oh, I can't move my eyes. God damn it.
Yes. I'm serious.
Oh man. All right. Well, everybody, I will see you guys on Sunday. Sacha, stay on. Peace,
All right.
everybody.
Thanks.